When my son Jordan got married, I kept quiet about the fact that I owned the building where his wedding reception was taking place. I kept quiet that the restaurant he called a greasy spoon was actually a multi-million-dollar empire. Good thing I stayed silent because 2 hours into the reception, my daughter-in-law Courtney showed her true colors. I stood in the bathroom stall holding a check for $50,000 that I had written as a wedding gift, and I listened to her laugh about how she was going to force me into a nursing home and sell my life's work. Her face went pale when she realized the stall door wasn't locked, but by then the check was already torn in half. I am Elijah Thorne, 68 years old, and for 40 years I have smelled like hickory smoke and barbecue sauce. To the world, I am just an old black man, driving a beat-up Ford, wearing stained aprons and serving ribs in a neighborhood that real estate sharks are drooling over. They see calloused hands and gray hair, and they assume I am slow. They assume I am simple. They assume I am broke. My son Jordan used to look at my hands with pride, but somewhere between his Ivy League education and meeting Courtney Miller, he started looking at me with shame. Before I continue this story of betrayal and justice, I want to know where you are tuning in from. Let me know in the comments below if you have ever been underestimated by the people you sacrificed everything for. Please hit like and subscribe if you believe respect is more important than money. It was a Sunday in Napa Valley, the kind of day that costs more than my father made in a lifetime. The sun was hitting the vines just right, making them look like rows of gold, but I couldn't appreciate the view. I was too busy adjusting the collar of a $3,000 Italian suit that felt like a straitjacket. I walked up to the reception entrance, a white tent that looked like a cloud floating on the grass. The hostess, a young woman with a clipboard and a headset, smiled at me until I gave her my name. Thorne, I said, keeping my voice low. Elijah Thorne, father of the groom. Her smile faltered. She ran her finger down the list, flipped a page, and then flipped another. Her perfectly manicured finger stopped at the very last page. Oh, yes, Mr. Thorne. She didn't make eye contact. You are at table 15. Let me show you the way. I followed her past the head table where crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. We walked past the tables filled with Courtney's family, the real estate tycoons and marketing executives laughing with their mouths wide open. We walked past the college friends, the colleagues, and even the photographer's station. We kept walking until the carpet ended and the floor turned to wood. Here we are, she said, gesturing to a small round table squeezed into the back corner. To my left was the swinging door to the kitchen. Every time a server kicked it open, a blast of hot air and the smell of dish soap hit me in the face. To my right was the entrance to the portable luxury restrooms. I could hear the flush of the toilets and the click of the lock every time a guest went inside. This was table 15. The exile table. I looked around at my table mates. There was Mrs. Higgins, a distant cousin from Georgia who I hadn't seen in 20 years. There were 2 teenagers who I think were the florist's assistants glued to their phones. And there was me, the father of the groom, sitting by the toilet. I felt a burning sensation in my chest that had nothing to do with heartburn. It was the sting of disrespect. I slowly pulled out the chair which wobbled on the uneven floor and sat down. The view from here was terrible. I could barely see the head table where my son was sitting. I watched Jordan from a distance. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, raising a glass of champagne, laughing at something his new father-in-law was saying. He didn't look for me, not once. He didn't scan the room to see if his father, the man who raised him alone after his mother Althea died, was comfortable. He was too busy playing the part of the successful architect, blending in with a world that I paid for him to enter. Then I saw Courtney. She was undeniably beautiful in a dress that probably cost more than my kitchen equipment. She floated between the tables, touching shoulders, accepting compliments, flashing that perfect white smile. She moved like a queen, inspecting her subjects. When she finally made her way to the back of the room near the kitchen door, her smile vanished. She didn't stop. She didn't come over to hug me or thank me for coming. She just glanced at table 15, her eyes sliding over me like I was a stain on the tablecloth. She snapped her fingers at a passing waiter. Make sure the people at table 15 don't drink too much of the reserve wine, she whispered, loud enough for me to hear. It's $80 a bottle. Give them the house blend. The waiter looked embarrassed, but he nodded. Courtney swished away her silk train, dragging on the floor, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume mixed with the kitchen exhaust. I looked down at my hands. They were clean scrubbed raw for this occasion, but I could still see the faint lines of charcoal under my fingernails. I looked at the sleeve of my suit. It was a dark navy, tailored to perfection. Nobody at this wedding knew the story of this suit. 2 weeks ago, Jordan had come to me nervous and sweating. "Dad," he had said, "Courtney's family is really formal. Please, just this once, don't wear your church suit. The one with the shine on the elbows. It doesn't fit the aesthetic." He had used that word. Aesthetic. I didn't have $3,000 lying around for a suit. My money was tied up in the business and in the secret investments I had been making for 30 years. But I didn't want to shame my son. So I did the only thing I could. I sold my truck. It was a 1978 Chevy Silverado, restored by my own hands. That truck was the first thing I bought when the restaurant started making a profit. It was the truck I drove Jordan to his first day of school in. It was the truck we used to haul the lumber to build the back deck of our house. I loved that truck more than any object I owned. I sold it to a collector for cash, and I used that cash to buy this suit so I could look like a man worthy of sitting at my son's table. And now here I was in a suit that cost me my history, sitting next to the bathroom. The waiter poured me a glass of the cheap house wine. It tasted like vinegar and regret. I took a sip and tried to swallow the lump in my throat. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and touched the envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000. It was everything I had in my liquid savings. I had emptied my emergency fund thinking that this money would help them put a down payment on a house. I wanted to hand it to Jordan to see that look of relief and pride in his eyes again. I wanted to buy my way back into his heart. Dinner was served. The filet mignon at my table was cold, probably because we were the last to be served even though we were right next to the kitchen. I ate in silence, listening to Mrs. Higgins complain about her gout. The speeches began. Courtney's father, a man who owned a chain of car dealerships, stood up. He spoke about legacy, about two powerful families coming together. He talked about how proud he was of Jordan for joining their firm. He never mentioned me. He never mentioned Althea. It was as if Jordan had sprouted from the ground, fully formed and wearing a tuxedo. Jordan stood up to give his speech. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Say it, son," I thought. "Just say my name. Acknowledge that I'm here." Jordan thanked the guests. He thanked Courtney's parents for their generosity. He thanked his fraternity brothers. He thanked the wedding planner. Then he paused. His eyes flickered toward the back of the room, towards the darkness where I sat. For a second, I thought he was going to do it. Then he looked away. And to my beautiful wife, he said, raising his glass, "You are my everything." The room erupted in applause. I clapped too, my hands feeling heavy and numb. He hadn't said it. He was ashamed. I was a secret he was keeping from his new life. I needed air. The kitchen smells were making me nauseous. I stood up, my knees popping, and navigated through the maze of chairs toward the side exit. I found myself in a narrow hallway that led to the patio restrooms. It was quiet here, away from the music and the laughter. I leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths, trying to calm the anger that was starting to boil in my veins. I am a patient man. You have to be patient to smoke a brisket for 14 hours. But everyone has a breaking point. The door to the ladies' lounge opened and I heard voices. I instinctively stepped back into the shadows of an alcove where the cleaning supplies were stored. "Oh my God, finally a break," a voice said. It was Courtney. I could hear the rustle of fabric as she adjusted her dress. "You look stunning," Court, another voice said. "Probably a bridesmaid. But tell me, who is that old guy sitting by the kitchen, the one who looks like he's about to fall asleep?" Courtney laughed, a cold, sharp sound. That's Jordan's dad, Elijah. Can you believe he actually wore a tuxedo? I'm surprised he didn't show up in a grease-stained apron smelling like pork ribs." The bridesmaid giggled. "He seems quiet." "He's useless," Courtney said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But he's sitting on a gold mine. That dump of a restaurant he runs, it's on a double lot in the redevelopment zone. Jordan says the land alone is worth $2 million. My breath caught in my throat. $2 million. They had appraised my property. "So what's the plan?" the bridesmaid asked. "The plan," Courtney said, sounding like she was discussing a business merger, "is to get him to retire. We're going to tell him the business is failing, or maybe that he's getting too old to manage it. Jordan is going to push for power of attorney. Once we have control, we sell the land, bulldoze that ugly shack, and use the money to fund our own firm. But won't he object?" "Please," Courtney scoffed. "He's a simpleton. He barely finished high school. He thinks Jordan is a god. If Jordan cries a little and says he needs help, the old fool will sign anything. We give him a little allowance, stick him in a budget-assisted living facility, and everyone wins. I just need to tolerate him for a few more months." I stood there in the dark, my hand clutching the envelope in my pocket so hard the paper crinkled. A simpleton, a fool. Stick him in a facility. This wasn't just disrespect, this was a conspiracy, this was a heist. My son, the boy I had taught to walk, the boy I had held when he cried over a broken toy, was plotting to erase my existence. I didn't storm into the ladies' room. I didn't scream. I did something quieter. I pulled the envelope out of my pocket. I looked at the name written in my careful cursive handwriting. Mr. and Mrs. Jordan Thorne. I thought about the sweat, the burns, the early mornings and late nights that had gone into earning that $50,000. I thought about my truck driven by a stranger now. Slowly, deliberately, I tore the envelope in half. The sound was loud in the quiet hallway. Rip. Then I put the halves together and tore them again. Rip. And again. Until the $50,000 gift was nothing but confetti in my calloused palm. I walked over to the trash can in the corner of the hallway and let the pieces fall. They fluttered down, landing on top of used paper towels. "Goodbye, new house down payment," I whispered. I walked back into the reception hall. The DJ had started playing a fast song and people were flooding the dance floor. I didn't go back to table 15. I walked straight toward the head table. I needed to look my son in the eye one last time before the war began. Jordan was laughing, loosening his tie. When he saw me approaching, his smile faltered. He looked nervous, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Dad," he shouted over the music. "You okay? You heading out?" I stood in front of him. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at him with the intensity of a man inspecting a fire. "I'm leaving Jordan," I said, my voice cutting through the bass of the music. "Enjoy your night. It's going to be the most expensive party you ever threw." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer. I turned to Courtney, who had just returned from the bathroom looking fresh and innocent. She recoiled slightly when she saw me this close. "Goodbye, Courtney," I said. "You were right about one thing. The apron doesn't fit the aesthetic, but neither do snakes." I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't look back. I walked out of the tent past the valet, who looked at me expecting a ticket. I didn't have a ticket. I didn't have a car. I had sold it. I began the long walk down the dark driveway toward the main road to call a taxi. As I walked, I took my phone out of my pocket. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Hello, Harrison," I said. "It's Elijah." "Elijah, it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday. Is everything all right?" "No, Harrison. Everything is far from all right. I need you to dust off your law degree, and I need you to meet me at the restaurant at 6 a.m. sharp." "What's going on, Elijah?" I looked back at the glowing tent in the distance where my son was dancing on the grave of our relationship. "I'm updating my will," I said. "And Harrison. Bring the eviction notices. We have some tenants to clear out." 2 weeks of silence had passed since the wedding reception. 2 weeks where I sat alone in my house, staring at the phone, waiting for an apology that I knew would never come. I had gone back to work at the restaurant, throwing myself into the heat of the smoker, letting the physical labor numb the ache in my chest. I thought I had seen the worst of it. I thought the disrespect at the wedding was the climax of our estrangement. I was wrong. It was only the prologue. It was a Tuesday night and a heavy storm was battering the windows of my craftsman-style home. The house was built in the 1950s, solid oak and brick, a place that had sheltered 3 generations of Thornes. I was sitting in my recliner reading a book when headlights swept across the living room wall. A car door slammed, then another. Then the doorbell rang, urgent and demanding. I pulled myself up, my joints popping in the damp weather, and opened the front door. Standing on my porch, drenched in rain, were Jordan and Courtney. Between them, they had 4 massive suitcases and a collection of boxes that looked like they had been packed in a hurry. Jordan looked wet and miserable. Courtney looked furious, holding a designer bag over her head to shield her hair from the rain. "Dad," Jordan stammered, water dripping from his nose. "We need help. It is an emergency." I looked at them. Part of me, the part that was still hurt from the wedding, wanted to close the door. But the father in me, the man who had promised Althea on her deathbed that I would always look out for our boy, stepped aside. "Come in," I said, "before you catch pneumonia." They dragged their luggage into my foyer, leaving a trail of muddy water on the hardwood floors. Courtney dropped her bags with a heavy sigh and immediately began inspecting her coat for water damage. She didn't say hello. She didn't look at me. She just looked at her coat. "What happened?" I asked, handing Jordan a towel. "It is the apartment," Jordan said, wiping his face. "The pipes burst. The whole place is flooded. The landlord says it will take at least a month to fix everything. The floors are ruined. The walls are full of mold. We have nowhere else to go, Dad." I looked at Courtney. She was busy typing on her phone, ignoring the conversation. The story sounded rehearsed. Jordan was a terrible liar. He always looked down at his shoes when he wasn't telling the truth. He was looking at his shoes now. But what could I do? "Throw my son out into the storm. You can stay here," I said. "The guest room is made up." "Actually," Courtney said, finally looking up. Her eyes scanned the living room, taking in the old family photos, the worn velvet armchair, the heavy curtains. "The guest room is too small for all our stuff, and the bed is bad for my back. We will need more space if we are going to be here for a month." "It is just temporary," Jordan added quickly, sensing my hesitation. "Just until the insurance sorts it out." I nodded slowly. "Make yourselves at home," I said, "but please be quiet. I have to be at the smoker by 4 in the morning." I went to bed with a knot in my stomach. I lay awake listening to them moving around downstairs. I heard furniture being dragged. I heard Courtney complaining about the smell of the house. She said it smelled like old people in Greece. I heard Jordan shushing her. Eventually the house fell silent, but I didn't sleep well. I had let the wolves into the sheep pen, and I had a feeling I was going to regret it. The next morning I left before they woke up. The restaurant was busy that day. We had a lunch rush that didn't end until 3 in the afternoon. I was exhausted, covered in sweat and sauce, but my mind was on my house. I had a bad feeling all day, a gnawing anxiety that made my hands shake when I was chopping the brisket. I left the manager in charge and drove home early. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a pile of boxes on the curb. It wasn't trash day. I parked the truck and walked over to the pile. My heart stopped. Sitting on top of a cardboard box was a quilt. It wasn't just any quilt. It was the patchwork quilt Althea had made during her chemotherapy treatments. Each square was a piece of fabric from one of Jordan's old baby clothes. It was the most precious thing she had left behind. It was sitting in the dirt. I ran to the front door and threw it open. The hallway was filled with more boxes, books, photo albums. The vintage sewing machine Althea had used to hem Jordan's pants for school. Her collection of ceramic angels. All of it. All of Althea's things were piled in the hallway like garbage waiting for the dump truck. A sound came from the end of the hall. The sound of upbeat electronic music. It was coming from Althea's room. When Althea died 5 years ago, I had kept her room exactly as she left it. Her perfume bottles were still on the vanity. Her Bible was still on the nightstand, open to her favorite psalm. It was my sanctuary. I would go in there on Sunday afternoons just to sit in her chair and feel close to her. It was a sacred space. I walked down the hall, my boots heavy on the floor. The door to Althea's room was wide open. I stepped inside and felt the air leave my lungs. The room was gone. The soft lavender walls had been painted a blinding sterile white. The heavy oak furniture was gone. The vanity was gone. The bed was gone. In their place were yoga mats, a ring light on a tripod, and a sleek, modern white desk with a laptop on it. The warm, comforting smell of lavender and old paper was replaced by the chemical sting of fresh paint and some artificial citrus air freshener. Courtney was standing in the middle of the room wearing expensive workout clothes, adjusting the ring light. She looked up when I entered, startled, but she didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed that I had interrupted her. "What is this?" I asked. My voice was a whisper. I couldn't find the breath to scream. "Oh, you are home early," Courtney said, turning down the music. "Jordan said you usually work until 6. "Where are Althea's things?" I asked, stepping further into the room. My hands were trembling at my sides. Courtney sighed, rolling her eyes. We moved them. "Look, Elijah, if we are going to live here, I need a workspace. I am a content creator. I need good lighting and a neutral background. This room has the best natural light in the house, but it was filled with so much junk. It was depressing." "Junk," I repeated. The word tasted like bile. That was my wife's life. That was her sanctuary. "She is dead," Elijah Courtney said. She said it so casually as if she were talking about a broken toaster. "Dead people don't need rooms. The living need rooms. I need to film my lifestyle vlog. I can't do that with a bunch of dusty angels and old quilts staring at me. It is creepy. I felt a heat rise up my neck that was hotter than any fire I had ever built. "You had no right," I said, my voice shaking. "You are guests in this house. You do not touch my wife's things." Jordan appeared in the doorway behind me. He looked pale. He saw the look on my face, and he saw the room. "Courtney," he whispered. "I thought you said you were just going to move the desk. You painted the walls." She shrugged. "The lavender was hideous, Jordan. It looked like a funeral home." I brightened it up. "We are doing your dad a favor. This increases the property value." I turned to my son. "Jordan," I said, "did you know about this?" Jordan looked at Courtney, then at me. "Dad, she needed a space. We didn't throw anything away. It is just in the hall. We can put it in the attic later." "The attic," I shouted. The sound made Jordan jump. "You want to put your mother's memory in the attic so your wife can film videos for strangers on the internet?" "You are being dramatic," Courtney snapped. She stepped forward, getting in my face. "You should be thanking me. I cleaned this place up. It was a shrine to a ghost. It is unhealthy, Elijah. You are living in the past. We are trying to help you move forward. Besides, we are family. What is yours is ours, right?" That was the moment. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a rude house guest. This was an invasion. Courtney didn't see me as a person. She saw me as an obstacle. She saw my house as a resource to be mined. And my son, my weak, foolish son, was too terrified of losing her to stand up for his own mother. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes for a second, picturing Althea's face. She would have told me to kick them out right then and there. But I needed to be smarter than that. If I kicked them out now, they would play the victim. They would tell everyone I was a crazy old man who threw his children out in the cold. I needed proof. I needed to show the world exactly who Courtney Miller was. I opened my eyes. I looked at the white walls. I looked at the ring light. "Get your things out of the hallway," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Put them in my bedroom. Do not touch them again. If I find one scratch on your mother's sewing machine, Jordan, I will forget that you are my son." Courtney smirked. She thought she had won. She thought I was surrendering. "Fine," she said. "But don't come in here when I am filming. I need absolute silence." I turned and walked out. I spent the next 3 hours carrying Althea's things into my bedroom, wiping the dirt off the quilt, apologizing to her memory with every step. When I was finished, I locked my bedroom door. That night, while Jordan and Courtney were sleeping in their renovated studio, dreaming of their future wealth, I made a phone call. I called a friend of mine named Marcus, who used to install security systems for casinos. "I need eyes, Marcus," I told him. "Inside the house, hidden, high definition. And I need audio." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my room surrounded by the boxes of my wife's life, and I waited for Marcus to arrive. He came at 4 in the morning, entering through the back door. We worked in silence. We installed a pinhole camera in the smoke detector in the living room. We put one in the kitchen disguised as a motion sensor. And I put one right outside the door of the studio, hidden in the frame of a grandfather clock. By the time the sun came up, my house was no longer just a home. It was a trap. I went to the kitchen to make coffee. Courtney walked in a few minutes later wearing her silk robe. She didn't say good morning. She opened the fridge, looked at the bacon and eggs I had bought, and wrinkled her nose. "We are going to need to change this," she said, gesturing to the food. "I am throwing this out. We are going vegan. And Elijah, you need to be quieter in the mornings. You woke me up." I poured my coffee. I took a sip. I looked at the smoke detector above her head where a tiny red light blinked, once invisible to the naked eye, but clear as day to me. "Do whatever you want, Courtney," I said. "Make yourself at home." She smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "Oh, I intend to," she said. "This place has potential. Once we get rid of the junk." I watched her walk away. I took another sip of coffee. Smile for the camera, I thought. Your movie has just started. The war for my dignity didn't start in a courtroom or a boardroom. It started in my kitchen, right in front of the refrigerator. 3 days after the invasion of my home, I came back from the restaurant bone-tired. My joints were aching from standing over the smoker for 12 hours, and all I wanted was the leftover collard greens and ham hocks I had slow-cooked on Sunday. It was my comfort food, a recipe that had been passed down from my grandmother, who was a sharecropper in Alabama. That food was the only thing that made the silence of my empty house bearable. I walked into the kitchen expecting the comforting smell of smoked meat. Instead, the air smelled like raw cleaning vinegar and kale. I opened the refrigerator door and blinked. The shelves were bare. My Tupperware containers full of greens were gone. The slab of bacon I kept for breakfast was gone. The jar of rendered duck fat I used for frying potatoes was gone. Even the pitcher of sweet tea was missing. In their place were rows of glass containers filled with things I couldn't pronounce: quinoa, chia seeds, almond milk, and bags upon bags of raw spinach. I stood there, the cold air from the fridge hitting my face, feeling a mixture of confusion and rising anger. "Looking for the heart attack in a bowl," a voice said behind me. I turned around. Courtney was sitting at the kitchen island eating a green apple with a knife and fork. She didn't look up from her tablet. "Where is my food, Courtney?" I asked, closing the fridge door a little harder than necessary. "I tossed it," she said calmly. "It was toxic, Elijah. Do you know how much sodium was in those greens? And the pork. It is literally poison. Jordan and I are doing a cleanse, and since we are living here, we decided to make it a household rule. No processed meats, no refined sugar, no soul food." I felt my hands curl into fists. "Soul food," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That is what raised your husband. That is what paid for his college degree. That is what paid for the roof over your head right now." Courtney finally looked up. Her eyes swept over me, starting at my work boots and ending at my gray hair. She wrinkled her nose, a look of pure disgust crossing her face. "Speaking of the roof," she said, standing up and taking a step back, "you smell, Elijah. You smell like burnt animal fat and cheap smoke. It is seeping into the furniture. It is embarrassing. When my friends come over, they ask if we are having a barbecue, but it is just you. You are a walking health code violation." I looked down at my apron. It was stained with sauce and ash. It was the uniform of my labor. It was the smell of hard work. "This smell is money, Courtney," I said. "This smell is independence." She laughed. A short, sharp sound. "It smells like poverty, Elijah. Go take a shower. And use the citrus soap I bought. The bar soap you use is drying out your skin." She walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there with a stomach that was growling and a heart that was breaking. She hadn't just thrown away my dinner. She had thrown away my culture. She was trying to scrub the blackness off of me one vegan meal at a time. I made a sandwich with dry bread and water, eating it over the sink like a thief in my own home. The next day, the war moved from my house to my sanctuary. It was the lunch rush at Thorne's Legacy. The restaurant was packed. The air was thick with the sound of Motown music, the clatter of silverware, and the laughter of customers who had been eating here for 30 years. I was in the back checking the temperature on the ribs when the kitchen door swung open. The chatter in the dining room died down instantly. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped out to see what had happened. Courtney and Jordan were standing in the middle of the dining room. They looked like aliens who had crash-landed in a place they didn't understand. Jordan was wearing a slim-fit suit, looking at his phone, refusing to make eye contact with the customers who had known him since he was in diapers. Courtney was wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a leather portfolio. She wasn't looking for a table. She was looking for a fight. She walked straight up to Ms. Hattie. Ms. Hattie was my head server. She was 70 years old, with knees that clicked when she walked and a heart made of gold. She had started working for me the day I opened. She was practically Jordan's second mother. "Excuse me," Courtney said, her voice cutting through the silence. She pointed a manicured finger at Ms. Hattie's apron. "There is a stain on your uniform, and your fingernails are too long. That is unsanitary." Ms. Hattie blinked, surprised. "Baby, this is barbecue sauce," she said, smiling kindly. "It comes with the territory, and my nails are clean. Who might you be?" "I am the future of this establishment," Courtney announced loud enough for the whole room to hear. "And the first thing that needs to change is the staff standards. We need people who look presentable. People who don't look like they just rolled out of bed." The room went deadly silent. A customer in the back, a mechanic named Big Mike, stood up halfway, but I held up a hand to stop him. I walked out from behind the counter. "Courtney," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "What are you doing here?" "We are here to save you, Elijah," she said, turning to me. She didn't lower her voice. She slapped the leather portfolio onto table 4, right next to a plate of half-eaten cornbread. "Sit down," she commanded. "Jordan, show him the renders." Jordan shuffled forward, pulling a large printed image out of the portfolio. He laid it on the table. I looked down. I didn't recognize my restaurant. In the picture, the warm brick walls were covered in white shiplap. The booth seats, worn soft by decades of customers, were replaced by hard metal stools. The smoker, the heart of the restaurant, was gone. In its place was a long glass counter, filled with green leaves and beige grains. The sign above the door in the picture didn't say Thorne's Legacy. It said Greens and Grains. "What is this?" I asked, looking at Jordan. "It is a pivot, Dad," Jordan mumbled. "The neighborhood is changing. People don't want ribs anymore. They want fast casual. They want health bowls." "No," I said. "People want food that tastes like love. This looks like food that tastes like cardboard." Courtney stepped in. "You are missing the point. The margins on barbecue are terrible. Meat is expensive. Wood is expensive. Do you know what the markup is on a kale salad? 500%. We can fire the kitchen staff, hire a few college kids to scoop quinoa, and triple the profits in month 1. Fire the staff, I repeated. I looked at Ms. Hattie, who was wiping a tear from her cheek. I looked at the cook, a young man I had hired straight out of rehab to give him a second chance. "You want to fire them to sell lettuce. I want to fire them to build a brand," Courtney corrected. "Look around you, Elijah. This place is a relic. It is dark. It is greasy. It attracts the wrong crowd. The wrong crowd." She meant the working class people. She meant the black community. She meant my people. "Get out," I said. Courtney laughed. "Don't be emotional. Think about the money. Think about Jordan. Do you want him to be known as the son of a rib shack owner forever? Or do you want him to be the CEO of a modern wellness franchise?" I looked at the plan again. I looked at the sterile white walls and the fake plants. I reached out with my calloused hand and grabbed the corner of the heavy cardstock. "Dad, don't!" Jordan warned. I didn't listen. I ripped the plan in half. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Then I ripped it again. I dropped the pieces onto the floor right next to Courtney's expensive Italian boots. "This is not a franchise," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "This is a home, and as long as I have breath in my body, I will not serve rabbit food to people who need a hot meal." Courtney's face turned red. She snatched the portfolio back. "You are a stubborn old fool," she hissed. "You are holding your son back. You are embarrassing him. Do you know what he tells his friends when they ask what you do? He changes the subject. Because he is ashamed of this place. He is ashamed of you." I looked at Jordan. He didn't deny it. He just looked at the floor, studying the tips of his shoes as if they held the secrets of the universe. That silence hurt more than any slap. My son ashamed of the sweat that bought his clothes, ashamed of the smoke that paid for his tuition. "Take your wife and leave Jordan," I said softly, "before I ban you from this restaurant for life." Courtney grabbed Jordan's arm. "Come on," she said. "Let him rot in his smoke. When the bank comes to foreclose because he can't adapt, he will come crawling to us." They turned and walked out. The bell above the door chimed a cheerful sound that felt completely out of place. Ms. Hattie walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I am sorry, Elijah," she whispered. I shook my head. "Don't be sorry, Hattie. Be ready." "For what, baby?" "For a war," I said, looking at the torn pieces of the plan on the floor. "They don't just want the money. They want to erase us. And I am not going to let that happen." I picked up a piece of the torn paper. It showed a logo of a green leaf. I crumpled it in my fist and threw it in the trash. Then I went back to the kitchen. I had ribs to check. And for the first time in years, the fire in the smoker felt like it was matching the fire in my belly. They wanted to clean up my act. I was about to show them that you can't wash away a legacy. The financial ambush happened on a Wednesday night. The house was quiet, but the air felt heavy like the pressure before a thunderstorm. I was sitting at the kitchen table nursing a cup of chamomile tea, trying to wash away the taste of the vegan dinner Courtney had forced on us. It was some sort of lentil loaf that tasted like wet cardboard. Jordan walked into the kitchen. He looked terrible. His skin was pale, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was wringing his hands the way he used to when he had failed a math test in high school. He pulled out a chair and collapsed into it, putting his head in his hands. "Dad," he whispered, "I am in trouble. Bad trouble." I put my mug down slowly. "What kind of trouble, Jordan?" "It is the market," he said, his voice trembling. "The investments. I tried to diversify our portfolio like Courtney suggested. We put everything into these new tech startups and crypto. It was supposed to be a sure thing, but the market crashed yesterday. We lost everything, Dad. Our savings, the money for the house repairs, everything." I looked at my son. I saw the sweat on his forehead. I saw the desperation in his eyes. But I also saw something else. I saw a rehearsal. He was reciting lines, how much I asked. Jordan swallowed hard. $200,000. And the margin calls are coming in. If I don't pay by Friday, they are going to seize our accounts. They might even come after my salary. Dad, I could lose my license. I could go to jail for negligence. He reached across the table and grabbed my hand. His palm was clammy. I need a favor, Dad. A big one. Just a temporary loan. I don't have $200,000 in cash, Jordan, I said calmly. You know that. I put everything back into the business. I know, he said quickly. But you have the restaurant, the building. It is paid off, right? Yes, you could leverage it. Jordan said, his eyes lighting up with a desperate hope. You could take out a home equity line of credit or a small business loan against the property. Just for a few months. Once the market bounces back, I will pay it off. I swear. I pulled my hand away. You want me to mortgage my life's work. You want me to put the only thing I own on the line for your gambling. It wasn't gambling, it was investing, he argued, sounding exactly like Courtney. And it is not risking it. It is just paper, Dad. Please. If you don't help me, Courtney will leave me. She can't handle being poor. She has standards. That was the truth. That was the only honest thing he had said. She couldn't handle being poor. I looked at him for a long moment. I let the silence stretch until he started fidgeting. I need to check the paperwork, I lied. I think the deed is in the safety deposit box at the bank. Give me a day or two to locate everything. Jordan slumped in relief. Thank you, Dad. Thank you. You are saving my life. He went upstairs to tell his wife the good news. I sat there in the dark listening to them celebrate. I heard the pop of a champagne cork. Strange, I thought. For people who just lost everything, they sure had expensive celebration habits. The next morning, I didn't go to the bank. I waited until Courtney left for her Pilates class and Jordan went to work. Then I went into my own home, into the room that used to be Althea's sanctuary and was now Courtney's office. I sat at the white desk. I didn't need to hack into a computer. These two were careless. They were arrogant. They thought I was just a dumb old man who didn't know how to read a balance sheet. In the bottom drawer of the desk, buried under some yoga magazines, I found a stack of envelopes. They were unopened bank statements and credit card bills. I opened the first one. It was a Platinum Amex in Courtney's name. The balance due was $40,000. I scanned the charges. There were no investment firms listed. There were no tech startups. Four Seasons Hotel Miami, $2,000. Gucci Beverly Hills, $5,000. Tesla lease payment, $1,200. Botox and Fillers Clinic, $800. I opened the next envelope. It was a letter from a collection agency addressed to Jordan. It wasn't about a market crash. It was about a personal loan he had taken out 3 months ago to pay for the wedding. He hadn't made a single payment. I opened another one. It was a notice from his employer, a final warning about unauthorized use of the company expense card. The picture became clear. There was no market crash. There was no bad investment. My son and his wife were financial vampires. They were bleeding money to maintain an image of wealth they didn't have. They were drowning in debt because Courtney refused to live within their means and Jordan was too weak to say no. They didn't want a loan to cover a loss. They wanted to consume my equity to pay for their luxury. They wanted to feed my restaurant to the beast of their vanity. I took photos of every document with my phone. Then I carefully put everything back exactly how I found it. I walked out of the room feeling a cold resolve settling in my gut. They wanted to play games with numbers. Fine. I knew numbers. I had been balancing food costs and labor margins for 40 years. I knew how to spot a loss, and I knew when it was time to cut it. 2 days later, the trap snapped shut, but not on me. I was at the restaurant prepping for the dinner service. It was a quiet afternoon. The smell of hickory smoke was comforting, grounding me in reality. The front door opened and a man walked in. He wasn't a customer. He was wearing a suit that was too shiny and shoes that were too pointy. He was holding a laser measuring device and a clipboard. He didn't look at the menu. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the floors. He pointed his lasers at the far wall and wrote something down. "Can I help you?" I asked, wiping my hands on my apron and stepping out from behind the counter. The man didn't stop writing. "Just doing a quick site survey," he mumbled. "Won't be long." "Site survey for what?" I asked, stepping into his path. "I didn't order a survey." He finally looked at me. He looked annoyed. "You must be the manager." "It is okay, I have authorization from the owner's representative." "I am the owner," I said, "and I didn't authorize anything." The man chuckled. He pulled a paper out of his pocket. "Look, buddy, I was sent here by Mrs. Courtney Thorne. She is the power of attorney for Mr. Elijah Thorne. She said the old man is a bit difficult. Confused, she asked me to get the square footage for the listing. The listing, I repeated. My blood ran cold. Yeah, the sale listing, the man said, looking around with a sneer. Prime location, but this building is a teardown. We are going to market it as a land value deal. Luxury condos, retail on the bottom. We need to get the demolition estimates ready before we go to market next week. Demolition. They weren't planning to mortgage the restaurant. They were planning to sell it. They were planning to bulldoze it. Jordan had lied to my face. He told me it was a loan, but Courtney had already called the sharks. She had already told them I was senile. She had already signed my name in her mind. I felt a rage so pure and hot it almost blinded me. But I didn't scream. I didn't attack the man. I channeled the stillness of a man who has stared into fire for decades. Get out, I said. The man sighed. Look, Pops, don't make this hard. Mrs. Thorne said you might get agitated. I walked over to the wall where my business license hung. It had my name on it. Elijah Thorne. Not Jordan Thorne. Not Courtney Thorne. I am not agitated, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I am informing you that you are trespassing. You have exactly 10 seconds to leave my property before I call the police and have you arrested for criminal trespass. And tell Mrs. Thorne that if she wants to sell my building, she will have to come here and tear it down brick by brick with her own manicured hands. The man looked at my eyes. He saw something there that made him put his laser away. He saw that I wasn't a confused old man. He saw that I was a dangerous obstacle. All right, he said, backing up. I am going. Crazy family. He hurried out the door. I watched him get into his car and drive away. I locked the front door. I turned the sign to closed. I walked back to the kitchen and sat on a milk crate. I pulled out my phone and looked at the picture of the credit card bill. They wanted to sell my legacy to pay for Gucci bags. They wanted to flatten 40 years of history to hide their own incompetence. I called Harrison. Harrison, I said when he answered. Yeah, Elijah. Is the paperwork ready? It is ready, Harrison said. But are you sure you want to do this? Once we execute this trust transfer and the eviction notice, there is no going back. It is nuclear, Elijah. I looked around my kitchen. I looked at the smoker that had fed thousands of people. I looked at the spot where Jordan used to do his homework while I cooked. I am sure, I said. They tried to sell me out, Harrison. They tried to bury me while I am still breathing. Bring the papers tomorrow. And bring a notary who actually has a license. I hung up. I stood up and walked to the prep station. I had work to do. If this was going to be my last week as a father to my son, I was going to make sure the ribs were perfect. I was going to feed the people who respected me, and then I was going to deal with the ones who didn't. That night when I went home, Jordan asked me if I had found the deed. I found it, I said, staring at the television. Great, he said, smiling. So we can go to the bank on Monday. Monday sounds perfect, I said. Monday was indeed going to be perfect, but not for him. Monday was the day the sheep was going to bite back. They didn't just want my money. They wanted my mind. They wanted to break the one thing that had kept me standing tall for 68 years, my dignity. It started small. It started with the keys to my truck. I have put my keys on the same brass hook by the front door every single day since 1982. It is muscle memory. I walk in, I lock the door, I hang the keys. But 3 days after the site surveyor incident, I went to leave for the market and the hook was empty. I searched the floor. I searched my pockets. I searched the kitchen counters. Nothing. Courtney walked in sipping a green smoothie. She watched me turning over cushions on the sofa. What are you looking for, Elijah? She asked. Her voice was dripping with that fake sweetness she used when Jordan was around. My keys, I said. I put them on the hook. She shook her head, a look of pity on her face. No, you didn't. I saw you put them in the refrigerator, Elijah, next to the almond milk. I stopped. The refrigerator. That was insane. I had never put keys in the refrigerator in my life. I walked to the kitchen and opened the door. There they were, sitting on the middle shelf, cold and mocking. I stared at them. I knew I hadn't put them there. I knew it. But a tiny seed of doubt planted itself in my stomach. Was I tired? Was the stress getting to me? See, Courtney said, walking up behind me, you are forgetting things again, just like yesterday when you left the stove on. I hadn't left the stove on. The safety pilot light was always on, but the burner was off. I knew that. But she said it with such conviction. It got worse. My wallet disappeared from my nightstand and reappeared in the bathroom sink. My blood pressure medication, which I took like clockwork at 7 in the morning, vanished. I found the bottle 2 days later in the trash can in the garage. Courtney was always the one to find them. She was always the hero. "Oh, Dad, you must have dropped it," she would say. Or, "Elijah, you are getting so confused lately. Maybe you should stop driving." Then came the whispers. I was watering the front lawn trying to ignore the headache that had been plaguing me when I saw Courtney talking to Mrs. Gable next door. Mrs. Gable was a sweet woman, the neighborhood gossip. Courtney was leaning in close, looking distressed. She gestured toward me, then tapped her temple. I turned off the hose and walked over. The conversation stopped abruptly. Mrs. Gable looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. She took a step back. "Hello, Mrs. Gable," I said. "Oh, hello, Elijah," she stammered. "Courtney was just telling me about your episodes. I am so sorry. If you ever need help finding your way home, just holler." "My episodes." I felt the blood rush to my face. "I am fine, Mrs. Gable," I said, my voice hard. "I know exactly where I am." Courtney put a hand on my arm. Her grip was tight, her nails digging into my skin. "Come on, Elijah," she said soothingly. "You are getting agitated again. Let's go inside before you have an accident." She led me away like an unruly child. When we got inside, she dropped the act. Her face went blank. "Stop fighting it, old man," she whispered. "Everyone believes it. You are losing your grip. It is only a matter of time before you hurt yourself." I went to my room and locked the door. I looked in the mirror. My eyes looked tired. My hands were shaking. Was she right? Was I losing it? No, that was what she wanted. She wanted me to doubt my own reality so I would sign the papers. I was not crazy. I was being hunted. The climax of her campaign came on a Saturday night. Jordan and Courtney decided to host a dinner party. They invited 2 couples from Jordan's firm and Courtney's parents. It was a show. A performance to display their new lifestyle and their benevolent care for the senile father. I didn't want to attend. I wanted to stay in my room. But Jordan insisted. "Please, Dad," he said. "It is important for my career. Just sit there and eat. You don't have to say anything." So I put on a clean shirt. I went downstairs. The table was set with my mother's fine china which Courtney had dug out of storage. The room smelled of roasted chicken and expensive perfume. Courtney came up to me before the guests arrived. "Here is your medicine, Elijah," she said, handing me a small paper cup with 2 pills in it. "You forgot to take it this morning. We don't want your blood pressure spiking tonight." I looked at the pills. One was blue, one was white. My blood pressure pills were both white. "What is the blue one?" I asked. "It is a vitamin," she said quickly. "Just take it. Don't cause a scene." I looked at her. I hesitated. But Jordan was watching me from the hallway looking anxious. If I refused, I was the difficult, crazy old man. If I took it, I was the compliant father. I swallowed the pills. The guests arrived. The wine flowed. The conversation was all about real estate trends and market volatility. I sat at the end of the table silent. 20 minutes into the meal, the room started to swim. My hands felt heavy like they were made of lead. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. The voices around the table started to sound distant like they were coming from underwater. I blinked, trying to clear my vision. I saw Courtney watching me. She wasn't eating. She was waiting. "Mr. Thorne," one of the guests asked me, "Jordan tells us you used to run a restaurant." I tried to answer. I tried to say that I still ran a restaurant, that I was the owner, but when I opened my mouth, the words slurred together. I run, smoke, meat. The words came out as an incoherent mumble. My head lolled forward. I tried to lift my fork to take a bite of mashed potatoes, but my grip failed. The fork clattered onto the china plate. My hand swept sideways, knocking over a crystal goblet of red wine. The glass shattered. The red wine soaked into the white tablecloth, looking like a fresh wound. The table went silent. "Oh my God!" Courtney shrieked. She jumped up. "Dad! Dad, are you okay?" I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't work. I slumped back into the chair, drool forming at the corner of my mouth. I knew what was happening. It wasn't dementia. It was a sedative. That blue pill. She had drugged me. "He is having an episode," Courtney announced to the horror-struck guests. She grabbed a napkin and started wiping my face, aggressively smearing the wine and saliva. "I am so sorry, everyone." The doctor said this stage would come. He loses control of his motor functions. He gets confused. I tried to push her away, but my arms were useless. "Get off me," I groaned. Shh, shh, it is okay, Courtney cooed. We have got you. Jordan helped me get him upstairs. He is a danger to himself. Jordan stood up. He didn't look at me with concern. He looked at me with embarrassment. He grabbed my arm and hoisted me up. I was a prop in their tragedy. I was the cautionary tale. They dragged me up the stairs, my feet hitting every step. They threw me onto my bed. Courtney leaned over me. Her face was blurry, but her voice was sharp as a razor. "See," she whispered, "you are helpless. You can't even feed yourself. You are done, Elijah." I passed out. When I woke up, it was morning. My head was pounding. My mouth was dry as dust. I sat up the memory of the night before crashing down on me. The humiliation. The helpless rage. I heard voices in the hallway. I dragged myself out of bed and opened the door a crack. Jordan and Courtney were standing there. Jordan was holding a glossy brochure. "It is the best option," Jordan Courtney was saying. "Sunny Meadows. They have a memory care unit. It is secure. He can't wander off. He can't burn the house down. And most importantly, he can't embarrass us in front of the partners again." Jordan looked at the brochure. "It costs $6,000 a month, Court." "We sell the restaurant," Courtney said. "That covers it for 10 years. It is the only way. He is dangerous, Jordan. Did you see him last night? He looked like a vegetable. Do you want to come home and find him dead at the bottom of the stairs, or do you want him safe?" Jordan sighed, a long, defeated sigh. "You are right. I will call them tomorrow. We will get the power of attorney finalized this afternoon. I can't watch him deteriorate like this." I closed the door silently. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a snap of madness. It was the snap of a tether breaking. The tether that bound me to my son. The tether of unconditional love that had made me blind to his weakness. He wasn't protecting me. He was discarding me. He was willing to lock me away in a room with a locked door medicated into oblivion just so he didn't have to deal with the inconvenience of my existence. He was willing to sell my legacy to pay for my imprisonment. I walked to the window. The sun was shining. The world was going on. I wasn't sad anymore. I was cold. I was ice. I went to my closet. I reached into the back of the top shelf inside an old shoebox and pulled out a prepaid burner phone I had bought 3 days ago just in case. I didn't trust the landline. I didn't trust my cell phone. I dialed Harrison's number. He answered on the first ring. It was Sunday. He was at church. "Harrison," I said. My voice was raspy, but it was steady. "Elijah, how are you?" "I am done, Harrison. What happened?" "They drugged me," I said, "and now they are planning to commit me. They have a brochure for Sunny Meadows. They are coming for the signature today." There was a silence on the other end. Then Harrison spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "That is assault, Elijah. That is criminal. I know," I said, "but I don't want them arrested yet. Not yet. I want them to feel it. I want them to think they have won." "What do you want to do?" "Execute the order," I said. "Bring the papers, bring the notary, but bring the other papers too. The ones we talked about. The ones for the trust." "Are you sure, Elijah? Once we do this, Jordan is cut off, completely." I looked at the door of my bedroom. I could hear Jordan's footsteps approaching. "I don't have a son anymore," I said. "I have a tenant, and his lease has just expired." I hung up the phone and hid it back in the shoebox. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. The door handle turned. Jordan walked in. He was holding a cup of coffee and a clipboard. He looked sad. He looked like a grieving son. It was a good performance. "Hey, Dad," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the fear behind his eyes. I saw the greed. "I am tired, Jordan," I said. "I am so tired." He sat next to me. "I know, Dad. We are worried about you. Courtney and I, we think it is time to get you some help. Real help." He held out the clipboard. It was the power of attorney document. "Just sign this, Dad. We will take care of everything. You won't have to worry about bills or the restaurant ever again. You can just rest." I looked at the pen. I looked at his hand. "Okay, son," I said. "I will sign, but not today. My hand is shaking too much from the episode." Jordan's face fell, but he quickly recovered. "Okay. Okay. Tomorrow then. First thing tomorrow morning." "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow morning." He patted my knee and left. I stared at the closed door. Tomorrow morning was going to be a bloodbath. But this time it wouldn't be my blood. They wanted to play the game of who is the craziest. I was about to show them that sanity is just a matter of who holds the keys. And I still had the master key. Sunday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The storm from the previous days had passed, leaving the sky a brilliant, innocent blue. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. From the kitchen came the smell of coffee, and surprisingly the scent of bacon. Real bacon. Not the turkey substitute or the tempeh strips Courtney had been forcing on the household for weeks. It was the smell of a bribe. I sat at the dining room table wearing my Sunday best. I had dressed slowly, buttoning my shirt with deliberate clumsiness, knowing that they were watching. I could hear them whispering in the kitchen. The clink of silverware against china sounded like the sharpening of knives. I looked at my hands resting on the mahogany table. This table had been a wedding gift from my father. It had seen Thanksgiving dinners, birthday parties, and funeral wakes. Today it was going to see an execution. But they didn't know who was going to be the one walking to the gallows. Courtney walked in first carrying a tray. She was wearing a pastel yellow dress that made her look like a benevolent nurse. She placed a plate of eggs and bacon in front of me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, Dad," she chirped. "I made your favorite. You need your strength today." Jordan followed her, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. He was wearing a tie, which was odd for a Sunday morning at home. He wouldn't look at me. He busied himself with pouring my coffee, his hand trembling slightly as the dark liquid splashed into the cup. "Thank you," I mumbled, keeping my voice low and raspy. "We have a guest coming over in a few minutes," Courtney said, sitting down across from me. Her eyes were sharp, monitoring my every move. "Just a friend of mine. He is going to help us with some paperwork. You remember we talked about this, right, Elijah? About getting things organized so you don't have to worry anymore." I nodded slowly, taking a bite of the bacon. It tasted like ash. I remember I said, "For the memory care place." "Exactly," Courtney said, kicking Jordan under the table. "To get you the best care. To make sure you are safe." The doorbell rang at exactly 9 o'clock. Jordan jumped as if he had been shot. I stayed seated, chewing slowly. Courtney smoothed her dress and went to answer the door. She returned with a man who looked like a used car salesman trying to pass for a banker. He was short, sweating profusely and carrying a briefcase that looked like it was made of fake leather. He wore a suit that was a size too small, the buttons straining against his stomach. "Dad, this is Mr. Henderson," Courtney introduced him. "He is a notary public. He is just here to witness your signature." Mr. Henderson walked over and extended a damp hand. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne. A pleasure to meet you. I hear we have some standard documents to take care of today." I looked at his hand but didn't shake it. I just stared at him until he pulled it back, wiping it on his pants. "Standard documents," I repeated, letting my head loll to the side a little. "Yes, sir," Mr. Henderson said, pulling a chair up to the table. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers. He laid them out with a flourish. "This is a standard power of attorney agreement. It simply designates your son and his wife as your legal guardians. It allows them to handle your bills, your medical decisions, and your day-to-day finances. It is very routine for men of your experience." He uncapped a heavy black pen and placed it next to the signature line. He pointed to a yellow sticky note with an arrow on it. "Just sign right here, Mr. Thorne, and we will get out of your hair." I looked at the paper. The text was dense, single-spaced, and full of legal jargon. I looked at Jordan. He was staring at the window, unable to watch. I looked at Courtney. She was leaning forward. Her breath held her eyes fixed on the pen. I reached out and picked up the pen. My hand shook violently. I let it shake. I wanted them to see the frailty. I wanted them to feel the victory so close they could taste it. "Is this for the bank?" I asked, my voice wavering. "Yes, Dad," Courtney said, her voice tight with impatience. "It is for the bank. It is for the doctors. It is for everything. Just sign it so you can finish your breakfast." I brought the pen tip down to the paper. I made a small mark, then stopped. I pulled the pen back. "I can't see the letters," I complained. "It is too small." Courtney let out a huff of frustration. She reached into her purse and pulled out a pair of reading glasses. She practically shoved them onto my face. Here she snapped. "Now you can see." "Sign it Elijah." I adjusted the glasses. I looked at the paper again. The blur of text sharpened into focus. I saw the words. I saw the trap. I leaned in close, putting my nose almost to the paper. The room was silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the heavy breathing of Mr. Henderson. Clause 14, Section B. I read out loud, my voice suddenly losing its rasp. Granting the attorney, in fact, the full and unqualified authority to sell, convey, mortgage, or liquidate any and all real property, including but not limited to the commercial residence located at 450 Oak Street and the residential property located at 12 Maple Avenue. The silence in the room changed texture. It went from anticipatory to confused. I looked up. I didn't look at Courtney. I looked at Jordan. You told me this was for medical decisions, Jordan, I said. Why does it say you can sell my house and my restaurant? Jordan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He looked at Courtney for help. It is just standard language, Dad, Courtney said quickly, her smile becoming brittle. It has to be in there just in case, like if you got really sick and we needed to sell the house to pay for a better hospital. We would never actually use it. It is just a formality. Right, Mr. Henderson? Mr. Henderson nodded vigorously, sweat dripping down his temple. Absolutely. Boilerplate text. Standard template. Nothing to worry about. I looked back at the paper. I flipped the page. And this part I continued reading. Clause 17. The grantor hereby waives the right to revoke this power of attorney unless deemed competent by two independent physicians chosen by the attorney in fact. I took off the glasses and placed them gently on the table. I sat up straight. The slump in my shoulders disappeared. The tremor in my hand vanished. I looked at Courtney with the cold, hard stare of a man who has fired people for stealing a single rib. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice filling the room with a deep, resonant baritone. I sign this, and you sell my business. You sell my home, and I can't stop you because the doctors you pay will say I am crazy. Is that the plan? Courtney's face went pale, then red. She stood up, slamming her hand on the table. You are being paranoid, Elijah. We are trying to help you. You are mentally declining. You need us to manage this. Just sign the damn paper. We don't have time for your drama. I picked up the document. I held it up to the light. Then very slowly, I crumpled it into a ball. I am not signing anything, I said. Courtney let out a scream of frustration. She looked like she was about to lunge across the table. Mr. Henderson, tell him. Tell him he has to sign it. He agreed verbally. That is a binding contract. Mr. Henderson looked nervous. Well, actually, Mrs. Thorne, without the signature, there is nothing I can do. If the subject is unwilling. He is not unwilling, he is confused, Courtney yelled. Give me the pen. I will guide his hand. She reached for my hand. I pulled it back and slammed my fist onto the table. The plates rattled. The coffee cup tipped over, spilling dark liquid across the white tablecloth. Enough, I roared. The room froze. Courtney recoiled as if I had slapped her. Jordan shrank into his chair. I turned my gaze to the notary. Mr. Henderson. Or should I call you Mr. Miller? No relation to Courtney, I assume. Just a coincidence. The man's eyes bulged. How do you know that name? I know a lot of things, I said, leaning forward. I know that you used to have an office on 5th Street, and I know that 6 months ago the State Board of Notaries revoked your license permanently. Courtney gasped. She looked at Henderson. Is that true? I ignored her. I kept my eyes on the fraud. You were caught notarizing forged deeds for nursing home patients in the county hospital. You were convicted of fraud and stripped of your seal. So, Mr. Henderson, I have a question for you. If I were to call the police right now and tell them you are in my house attempting to notarize a legal document with a revoked seal, how long do you think you would go to jail for? 5 years, maybe 10 since it involves elder abuse. Mr. Henderson stood up so fast his chair fell backward. He grabbed his briefcase with shaking hands. I didn't know, he stammered. Mrs. Thorne told me it was a family matter. She said everyone was in agreement. I can't be here. He scrambled away from the table, backing toward the door. Wait, Courtney shouted. You can't leave. We paid you. Keep the money, he yelled, fumbling with the doorknob. I am not going back to prison for this. He threw the door open and ran out, leaving it wide open. We could hear his car tires screeching as he peeled out of the driveway. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The air in the room felt thick with the revelation. I looked at my son and his wife. Courtney was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked like a cornered animal. Jordan had his head in his hands, weeping silently. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I picked up the crumpled ball of paper and tossed it onto Courtney's plate right on top of the cold eggs. "Breakfast is over," I said. Courtney looked up at me. Her mask was gone. Her beauty was twisted into something ugly and hateful. "You think you are so smart," she hissed, "but you just signed your own death warrant. We will declare you incompetent anyway. We will get a court order. You can't fight us, Elijah. You are old. You are alone. We are the only family you have." I walked to the head of the table. I looked down at her. "I am not alone, Courtney. I have the truth. And I have Google. Next time you try to scam a man who built a business from the ground up, make sure you clear your browser history and make sure your accomplice isn't a known felon." I turned to Jordan. "And you," I said softly. "My son. You sat there. You watched her try to steal everything your mother and I built. You poured my coffee while she prepared the knife." "Dad, Jordan sobbed. "I didn't have a choice." "We always have a choice, Jordan," I said. "You just made yours." I walked out of the dining room. I walked to the front door and closed it, locking it firmly. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. The only thing left was the cold, hard resolve of a man who had work to do. I went into the kitchen and picked up my phone. I dialed Harrison. "They took the bait," I said. "The notary was a fraud, just like we thought." "Did you sign?" Harrison asked. "No," I said, "but I got everything I needed." They showed their hand. "It is time to drop the hammer, Harrison, file the eviction notice, and activate the trust protocols." I hung up. I could hear Courtney screaming at Jordan in the other room. I didn't care. I went to the refrigerator, took out the almond milk, and poured it down the sink. Then I took out a package of frozen ribs from the bottom of the freezer. It was time to start cooking again. It was time to bring the flavor back to this house. And it was going to be spicy. The sound of the front door slamming behind the fleeing notary echoed through the house like a gunshot. For a moment, there was only silence, the heavy, suffocating silence of a plan that had gone spectacularly wrong. I stood at the head of the table, my hands resting on the back of my chair, watching the two people who had plotted my demise. Jordan was staring at the tablecloth, his face gray and lifeless. But Courtney was not defeated. She was cornered, and a cornered predator does not surrender. It attacks. She turned to me slowly. Her face was no longer beautiful. It was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Her eyes, usually so calculated and cool, were burning with a manic fire. "You think you have won?" she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "You think because you scared off a cheap notary that you have won? You are pathetic." She took a step toward me. Then another. She was shouting now. "You are a selfish, senile old man. Do you hear me? You are nothing. You are a relic. You spend your days sweating over a pit of fire cooking pig meat for people who can barely afford to tip. You smell like smoke and grease and failure. And you want to hold on to that. You want to keep that dump of a restaurant while your son, your own flesh and blood, is drowning." She pointed a finger at my chest, stabbing the air with every word. "We were trying to save you. We were trying to turn that piece of junk land into something valuable, something that matters. But you are too stupid to see it. You are so obsessed with your little legacy that you are willing to drag us down with you. Well, I have news for you, Elijah. That restaurant is worthless. It is a shack. It is an eyesore. And you are just a sad old man standing in the way of progress." Jordan finally looked up. "Courtney, stop," he whispered. "Shut up, Jordan," she screamed, spinning on him. "You are just as weak as he is. If you had a backbone, you would have declared him incompetent months ago. We wouldn't be in this mess if you were a real man." She turned back to me, her chest heaving. "You want to play hardball, Elijah? Fine. We will play. We will sue you. We will drag you through every court in this state. We will prove that you are mentally unfit. We will take everything. And when we are done, you will be rotting in a state facility and I will be drinking champagne on the ashes of your precious barbecue joint." I watched her rant. I watched the spit fly from her mouth. I listened to every insult, every threat, every word of contempt. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt pity. She was so loud, and she was so wrong. I waited until she stopped to take a breath. I waited until the echo of her screaming died down. "Are you finished?" I asked calmly. She glared at me, panting. "I am finished when I say I am finished." I nodded. "Good, because now it is my turn." I walked over to the antique sideboard in the corner of the dining room. For years, Courtney had ignored this piece of furniture, calling it dusty and old-fashioned. She didn't know that inside the bottom cabinet behind a false panel was a fireproof safe. I knelt down. I could feel their eyes on my back. I spun the dial. Right to 20, left to 10, right to 5. Click. I opened the heavy steel door. I reached inside and pulled out a thick leather portfolio. It wasn't the fake leather briefcase Mr. Henderson had carried. This was real Italian leather, worn smooth by time, smelling of authority. I stood up and walked back to the table. I placed the portfolio down gently. It made a heavy, solid thud that sounded like a judge's gavel. "Sit down, Courtney," I said. She remained standing, defiant. "I am leaving." I said, "Sit down." I commanded, my voice booming off the walls. It was the voice I used to command a kitchen crew during a dinner rush. It was a voice that brooked no argument. Courtney sat. I unzipped the portfolio. I didn't take out a single sheet of paper. I took out a stack of deeds. I took out a ledger bound in black bookcloth. I took out a map of the city district. "You called my restaurant a shack," I said, opening the map and smoothing it out on the table. "You said it was an eyesore. You said the land was worth $2 million. I looked at Jordan. "That is what you told her, right? That the lot was worth $2 million. Jordan nodded, looking confused. "That is what the developer said, Dad." I chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. "The developer was lowballing you, son. But that is irrelevant, because you made a mistake, a very big mistake. You assumed that Thorne's legacy was the only thing I owned." I picked up the first deed. "This is the deed to 450 Oak Street," I said. "The restaurant, paid off in 1995. I placed it on the table. Then I picked up the next one. "This is the deed to 452 Oak Street," I said. "The brick building right next door. The one that houses the yoga studio you go to every Tuesday and Thursday, Courtney. The one where you pay $200 a month for a membership." Courtney's eyes widened. She stared at the paper. I picked up the next one. "And this is 454 Oak Street," I continued. "The boutique clothing store. The one where you bought that yellow dress you are wearing right now. I believe the rent they pay me every month covers the mortgage on this house and then some." I placed it down. I picked up another and another. 456 Oak Street. The organic grocery store where you buy your kale. 458 Oak Street. The dry cleaners. 460 Oak Street. The Golden Bean coffee shop. I paused, holding the deed to the coffee shop in my hand. "You love that place, don't you, Courtney? I see the cups in the trash every day. You like their cold brew. You like to sit there with your laptop and pretend to work. You check in there on social media. My coffee spot, you call it." I dropped the deed onto the pile. "It is not your coffee spot. It is my building. I built that commercial strip. I bought the lots one by one over 30 years. When the neighborhood was bad and nobody wanted to invest, I bought. When the riots happened and people fled, I bought. I renovated every single one of those storefronts with my own hands, and the profits from the ribs you despise." The pile of papers on the table was now 3 inches thick. It represented a kingdom built on smoke and meat and patience. Courtney was staring at the pile as if it were a bomb. Her mouth was slightly open. Her face had gone from red to a ghostly white. The arrogance was draining out of her, replaced by a dawning horror. You own the strip," she whispered. "The whole strip." "I own the block, Courtney," I said. "From the corner of Oak all the way down to the intersection of Main. 12 businesses, 12 tenants. And do you know who the landlord is? Do you know who signs their leases?" I tapped the black ledger. "A holding company called Althea Properties, LLC, named after my wife, the woman whose room you painted white." Jordan was shaking his head. I didn't know, he stammered. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" I thought we were just getting by." I looked at my son with a mixture of love and disappointment. "I didn't tell you because I wanted you to build your own way," I said. "I wanted you to have the hunger. If you knew you were sitting on a gold mine, you would never have worked a day in your life. And looking at you now, I see I was right. You didn't build anything, Jordan. You just married a woman who wants to spend what I built." I turned back to Courtney. She was trembling. She looked at the deeds, and then she looked at me. She saw the man she had called a simpleton. She saw the man she had tried to lock away. And now she saw the man who held the keys to her entire lifestyle. "You called me a failure?" I said, my voice quiet but hard as steel. "You said I smell like grease. Let me explain something to you about that smell. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table right next to the pile of deeds. I don't sell barbecue to pay the bills. I sell barbecue because I love it. I stand over that fire because it connects me to my father and his father before him. That restaurant is my soul. But this, I gestured to the pile of papers, this is my business. The rent from that yoga studio alone makes more in a month than your marketing salary makes in 3. That coffee shop pays me a percentage of their gross profit. Every time you buy a latte, Courtney, you are putting money in my pocket. Every time you buy a dress, you are paying my property tax. I stood up straight, towering over them. You stood in my kitchen and told me I was useless. You told me I was holding you back. You didn't realize that I am the ground you walk on. I am the roof over the heads of the businesses you think are so trendy. I am the invisible hand that keeps this neighborhood running. I picked up the ledger and closed it with a snap. And the funniest part is you are in debt up to your eyeballs. You owe money to credit card companies. You owe money to banks. You are drowning. And you decided to insult the one man, the only man who has the liquidity to save you. You just spit in the face of your biggest potential creditor. Courtney looked like she was going to be sick. She looked at Jordan, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. He was staring at the deeds, realizing the magnitude of what they had almost thrown away, realizing that the father he was ashamed of was a tycoon in disguise. Dad, Jordan whispered, "Please, we didn't know." "Ignorance is not a defense," I said. "Greed is not an excuse. You plotted against me, you tried to steal from me, and you did it while eating my food and sleeping under my roof." I gathered the papers up and put them back in the portfolio. I zipped it shut. "The game is over," I said. "I am not signing your power of attorney. I am not going to a memory care facility. But things are going to change. Drastically." What are you going to do?" Courtney whispered, her voice barely audible. I looked at her. I saw the fear. It was the fear of a parasite realizing the host is about to take medicine. "I am going to do what any good landlord does when the tenants become destructive," I said. "I am going to serve notice." I walked toward the door of the dining room. I stopped and looked back at them one last time. "You have 3 days," I said. "Pack your bags, pack your yoga mats, pack your arrogance, because Althea Properties LLC has a zero-tolerance policy for disrespect, and eviction starts now." The silence in the dining room was shattered by a sound that made my skin crawl. It was Courtney laughing. It wasn't a genuine laugh. It was a high-pitched, brittle sound like glass breaking in a garbage disposal. She wiped her face with a napkin, trying to smear the look of terror back into a mask of composure. She stood up and walked around the table toward me, her hips swaying in an exaggerated rhythm. "Oh, Elijah," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You really had us going there. That was quite a performance." She reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back. She froze her hand, hovering in the air. "Come on, Dad," she continued, dropping the tone of the shrew and adopting the voice of a sweet, misunderstood daughter. "We didn't mean any of those things we said. We were just stressed. You know how it is. The market crashing, the house flooding. We were just trying to protect the family assets. If we knew you were sitting on this empire, we never would have worried. We are a team, right? The Thorne dynasty." She looked at Jordan, who was still staring at the floor. "Jordan, tell him. Tell him we are a team." Jordan looked up. His eyes were red. He looked at his wife, and then he looked at me. He saw the cold resolve in my eyes, and he knew the game was over. But Courtney was in denial. She was a narcissist who couldn't conceive of a world where she didn't win. "We can help you manage it," she said, speaking faster now, desperation leaking into her voice. 12 tenants. That is a lot of work for one man. You need a property manager. You need a marketing director. I can rebrand the whole strip. We can raise the rents. We can double your income, Elijah. We can be partners." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who minutes ago had called me a senile old fool, the woman who had drugged me, the woman who had thrown my dead wife's memories into the hallway. "You are right, Courtney," I said, my voice calm and even. "Managing 12 tenants is a lot of work. That is why I am getting rid of the worst ones first." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I mean you," I said. "You are the only tenant who doesn't pay rent. You are the only tenant who destroys the property. And you are the only tenant who tried to have the landlord committed to an asylum." I walked over to the front door and opened it wide. The morning sun streamed in blindingly bright. "I said you had 3 days," I said. But I have changed my mind. I don't trust you in this house for 3 more minutes. If I let you stay, you will probably burn it down or steal the copper wiring. I pointed to the driveway. Get out. Now. Courtney stared at the open door, her face contorted. You can't do this, she screamed, dropping the act completely. This is illegal. We have rights. We established residency. You have to give us 30 days' notice. I walked back to the table and picked up the fake power of attorney document she had tried to force me to sign. You established residency based on a lie, I said. You said your apartment was flooded. I called your landlord yesterday while you were at yoga. He told me you were evicted for non-payment of rent 2 weeks ago. There was no flood. You broke into my house under false pretenses. In the state of California, that is considered trespassing and fraud. So you can leave voluntarily, or you can leave in the back of a police car. It is your choice. Courtney looked at Jordan. Do something, she shrieked. He is throwing us on the street. Jordan stood up slowly. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Come on, Court, he whispered. Let's go. He started walking toward the door. Courtney let out a howl of rage, but she followed him, grabbing her purse. They walked out onto the porch. Wait, I said. They stopped. Jordan turned around, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Maybe he thought I was relenting. Maybe he thought I was going to offer them money for a hotel. The keys, I said. Jordan reached into his pocket and pulled out the house key. He held it out. No, I said. Not the house key. I will change the locks within the hour. I want the car key. Jordan froze. He looked at the silver Lexus parked in the driveway. It was his pride and joy. It was the symbol of his success. He washed it every Saturday. He parked it diagonally to take up 2 spaces. The car, he stammered. But, Dad, how will we get our stuff? How will we get to a hotel? That car is registered to Thorn Catering Services, I said. I bought it 3 years ago for company use. You have been using it as a personal vehicle, but since you are no longer an employee of the company and you are certainly not part of the family business anymore, the company is reclaiming its asset. Jordan looked like I had punched him in the gut. But Dad, it is my car. Everyone knows it is my car. It is a company car, Jordan, I said, holding out my hand. And the company has decided to downsize its liabilities. Give me the key. Courtney grabbed Jordan's arm. Don't give it to him, Jordan. He is bluffing. He won't leave us stranded. Jordan looked at me. He saw the man who had bought him his first bicycle. He saw the man who had taught him to drive in that old Chevy truck I had sold for his suit. And he saw that that man was gone, replaced by a landlord collecting a debt. He dropped the key into my hand. It felt heavy and cold. You can take your suitcases, I said, pointing to the pile of luggage they had never fully unpacked in the hallway. You can drag them. It is a nice day for a walk. I watched them. I watched my son and his wife drag 4 heavy suitcases and 3 boxes of clothes out of my house. Courtney was cursing. She was screaming about lawsuits. She was screaming about how I was a bitter old man who would die alone. Jordan was silent. He dragged the bags, his expensive suit sweating in the sun. They reached the sidewalk. The commotion had attracted attention. Mrs. Gable was next door watering her petunias. Mr. Henderson across the street was washing his car. They stopped what they were doing. They watched. These were the neighbors Courtney had poisoned against me. These were the people she had told I was crazy. Courtney saw them watching. She tried to salvage her dignity. She stood up straight and pointed back at the house. He is having an episode, she shouted at Mrs. Gable. He is violent. We have to leave for our own safety. He needs professional help. Mrs. Gable looked at Courtney. Then she looked at me, standing on the porch, calm and collected, holding the keys to the Lexus. Mrs. Gable turned off her hose. She walked to the edge of her lawn. He looks fine to me, dear, she said loud enough for the whole street to hear. But you look a mess. Did you know lying to the elderly is a sin? Courtney gasped. She looked around. She saw the judgment in the eyes of the neighborhood. The narrative had flipped. They saw the suitcases. They saw the desperation. They saw the truth. Come on, Jordan, she hissed, dragging a suitcase that had a broken wheel. It made a scraping sound on the pavement. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was the sound of their departure. I watched them walk down the street toward the bus stop 3 blocks away. They looked small. They looked ordinary. Without the house, without the car, without the lie, they were just 2 people with bad credit and heavy baggage. I stepped back inside. I closed the heavy oak door. I didn't slam it. I closed it gently, firmly. Click. The lock engaged. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. I took a deep breath. The air in the house was already changing. The smell of Courtney's perfume was fading. The energy of their greed was dissipating. I was alone. For the first time in weeks, I was truly alone. I walked into the living room. I looked at the spot where the quilt had been thrown on the floor. I looked at the white walls of Althea's room. There was work to do. I had to repaint. I had to bring the furniture back. I had to smudge the house with sage to get rid of the bad spirits. But first I went to the kitchen. I picked up the phone. I called the locksmith. "Hello," I said. "I have an emergency. I need every lock in the house changed, and I need it done within the hour." Then I walked to the window and looked at the Lexus in the driveway. I pressed the button on the key fob. The lights flashed. The horn chirped. It was a nice car. Maybe I would sell it. Maybe I would buy my truck back. Or maybe I would just drive it to the restaurant and park it right in front so everyone could see that Elijah Thorne was back in the driver's seat. I went to the refrigerator. I pulled out the last package of bacon I had hidden in the vegetable drawer. I put a pan on the stove. I turned up the heat. As the bacon sizzled, the smell filled the house. It smelled like salt. It smelled like fat. It smelled like home. "I am Elijah Thorne," I whispered to the empty room, "and I am just getting started." The morning after the eviction felt like the first day of spring. The air in my house was still. The heavy perfume Courtney wore was finally fading, replaced by the smell of lemon polish and old wood. I sat on my porch drinking black coffee, watching the sun come up over the neighborhood I practically owned. For the first time in months, I didn't have a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I thought the war was over. I thought I had won. But I forgot one thing. A snake doesn't stop biting just because you throw it out of the garden. It just waits in the grass. My phone rang at 7:30. It was Ms. Hattie. She never called me before 9. "Elijah." She was crying. Her voice was high and panicked. "Elijah, have you seen the internet?" "I don't look at the internet." "Hattie, you know that. I leave that to the kids." "You need to look," she sobbed. "Oh Lord, have mercy, Elijah. They are destroying us." I hung up and went inside. I opened my laptop. I didn't have to look far. My restaurant Thorne's Legacy was trending locally, but it wasn't because of my ribs. I clicked on the link to a popular neighborhood review site. There was a post written by a user named Truthseeker99. I knew immediately who it was. The writing style was unmistakably Courtney's. It was filled with buzzwords and dramatic pauses. The post was titled, "The Nightmare on Oak Street." I read the words and felt the blood drain from my face. "It is with a heavy heart that I must share my trauma," the post began. "For months I lived in fear of my father-in-law, Elijah Thorne. Behind the facade of a beloved community pillar is a monster. Not only does he run his restaurant with complete disregard for health codes, I personally witnessed rats in the kitchen and the use of expired meat, but he is also a predator. He made inappropriate advances toward me in his own home, and when I refused, he evicted my husband and me, leaving us homeless. Please support survivors. Boycott Thorne's Legacy." I sat there staring at the screen. My hands were shaking not from fear but from a cold, dark rage. She hadn't just attacked my business, she had attacked my character. She had weaponized the very real pain of actual victims to destroy an old man who just wanted his house back. I scrolled down. The comments were pouring in like sewage. Disgusting. I always thought that place looked dirty. Cancel him. I hope he rots in jail. Then came the reviews. 1 star, 1 star, 1 star. Hundreds of them. People who had never eaten at my restaurant, people who lived in different states, were destroying 40 years of hard work in a matter of minutes. The algorithm was feeding the mob, and the mob was hungry for blood. I closed the laptop. I didn't have time to be angry. I had to go to work. When I pulled up to the restaurant, there was a news van parked across the street. A reporter was standing there with a microphone pointing at my sign. I drove around to the back alley and entered through the kitchen. The kitchen was silent. Usually at this hour, the prep cooks would be laughing, chopping onions, listening to the radio. Today, they were standing in a circle looking at their phones. When I walked in, they looked up. I saw doubt in their eyes. That hurt more than the post. These were boys I had hired from the neighborhood. Boys I had mentored. And for a split second, they wondered if the monster on the internet was real. "Get back to work," I said, my voice steady. The ribs don't smoke themselves. They scrambled back to their stations, but the energy was gone. The air was thick with tension. At 11 o'clock, the front door opened. It wasn't a customer. It was a man in a blue windbreaker holding a clipboard. Behind him were 2 police officers. "Mr. Thorne," the man said. "I am Inspector Miller from the Health Department. We received multiple anonymous complaints this morning regarding a rodent infestation and the storage of hazardous meat. We need to do an immediate emergency inspection." I looked at the officers. "Is this necessary?" I asked. "Just procedure, sir," one of the officers said. "We are just here to keep the peace. There are some protesters forming outside." I looked out the window. Sure enough, a group of 5 or 6 young people, probably friends of Courtney, were holding cardboard signs. "End the abuse. Rats in the kitchen." "Come in, Inspector," I said, stepping aside. "You know this kitchen. You ate here last week." Inspector Miller looked apologetic, but he didn't stop. "I have to do my job, Elijah." The complaints were very specific. He spent 2 hours tearing my kitchen apart. He looked under the stoves. He checked the temperature of every single piece of meat in the walk-in cooler. He opened bags of flour. He shined his flashlight into the drains. The lunch rush came and went, but there was no rush. A few regulars came in, saw the police, saw the inspector, and turned around. The dining room sat empty. Ms. Hattie stood by the host stand, wiping down menus that no one would touch. She looked like she had aged 10 years in a single morning. Finally, Inspector Miller put away his flashlight. "Well, Elijah," he said, sighing, "I don't know who called this in, but they were lying. This kitchen is cleaner than a hospital. I am going to sign off on it. But what I asked. But the damage is done," he said, looking out at the empty tables. "People see a health inspection van and police cars, and they assume the worst. It is going to take a long time to recover from this." He left. The police left. The protesters stayed for another hour taking selfies for their social media accounts before getting bored. I sat down at table 4. The restaurant was silent. I calculated the loss in my head. A day of revenue gone. But it wasn't just money. It was trust. Courtney had stolen the trust of my community. Ms. Hattie walked over and poured me a glass of sweet tea. Her hand was trembling. "Elijah," she whispered, "are we going to close?" I looked at her. I looked at the photos on the wall. Photos of me with mayors, with basketball stars, with regular folks who had celebrated their anniversaries here. "No, Hattie," I said. "We are not closing. We are fighting." I took out my phone and called Harrison. "Did you see it?" Harrison asked immediately. "I saw it," I said. "It is defamation per se, Elijah. It is libel. We can sue her for millions. I don't want to just sue her, Harrison. I want to end this. I want to make sure she never mentions the name Thorne again." "Come to the restaurant," I said, "and bring your laptop. I have something to show you." Harrison arrived 20 minutes later. He looked furious. He was a man of the law and he hated liars. We sat in the back office away from the sad silence of the dining room. I opened the security app on my phone. "You told me to install cameras, Harrison," I said. "You told me to get eyes inside the house." I scrolled back through the timeline. I went past the eviction. I went past the notary scene. I went back to the Tuesday before the wedding. "Here," I said. "Watch this." On the screen, a grainy but clear video played. It was the living room of my house. Courtney was on the phone, walking back and forth. She was holding a glass of wine. "Yes, Mom," she was saying. "The plan is working. The old man is totally out of it. I moved his wife's junk and he didn't even fight back." She laughed, taking a sip of wine. "No, he hasn't touched me." "Gross, Mom. He is afraid of me. But if he tries to kick us out, I have a backup plan. I will just say he grabbed me. Who are they going to believe? A crying young woman or a senile black man? The optics are perfect. I will ruin him. I will take the house in the settlement." Harrison watched the video, his jaw tightening. "There is more," I said. I skipped forward to the night of the dinner party. The video showed Courtney in the kitchen crushing the blue pill into my food. It showed her laughing with Jordan about how I would be drooling in an hour. "That is assault," Harrison whispered. "That is poisoning." "And this," I said, clicking on one last video. This was from the morning of the eviction. It was just after I had gone to the kitchen to call the locksmith. The camera in the hallway captured Courtney standing by the door. She looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then she threw herself against the wall. She slid down to the floor, ruffling her hair and ripping the strap of her dress slightly. She took a selfie of herself looking disheveled and crying. "That is the photo she posted," I said, pointing to the screen. "The one she used to claim I attacked her. She staged it, Harrison, 5 minutes after I had already walked away." Harrison closed his eyes and let out a long, slow breath. Elijah, he said, opening his eyes. This isn't just a lawsuit. This is a prison sentence. This is fraud. This is extortion. This is filing a false police report. He looked at me with a grim smile. She thinks she is fighting a PR war. She doesn't realize she just handed us a smoking gun. What do we do? I asked. We don't post on Facebook, Harrison said, packing up his things. We go to the district attorney, and we draft a cease and desist order that will make her wish she had never learned how to type. He stood up. Keep the restaurant open, Elijah. Ignore the reviews. By tomorrow morning, Courtney Miller won't be worrying about likes. She will be worrying about bail money. I walked Harrison to the door. The sun was going down. The protesters were gone. The street was quiet. I went back into the kitchen. The staff had cleaned everything 3 times over. They looked at me, waiting. Fire up the smoker, I said. But boss, the cook said, nobody is here. They will come back, I said, putting on my apron. The truth tastes better than lies, son, and tomorrow we are serving a full platter of truth. I looked at the empty dining room one last time. Courtney had tried to burn my house down. She didn't know that I was born in the fire. She thought she was the heat. She was about to find out she was just the kindling. The war had moved from the physical world to the digital one, and I was ready to launch the nuclear option. I sat in the back office of Thorne's Legacy with Harrison by my side. The glow of the laptop screen illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. It was 8 in the morning. The internet was already awake and buzzing with the lies Courtney had fed it. The review count on my restaurant page had dropped to 1.5 stars. The comments were calling for my arrest. They were calling for the health department to shut me down permanently. Harrison looked at me. His finger hovered over the enter key. Are you ready, Elijah? He asked. Once we send this, there is no taking it back. This will destroy her career. It will make her unemployable. I looked at the screen. We had drafted 2 emails. The first was addressed to the board of directors and the human resources department of Zenith Marketing, the firm where Courtney worked as a senior director. The subject line was simple: evidence of employee misconduct and fraud. Attached to the email were the video files. The video of her plotting to frame me, the video of her admitting to poisoning my food, and the video of her staging the assault in my hallway. We also included a copy of the police report we had filed an hour ago for elder abuse and filing a false report. The second post was for the restaurant's social media page. It was titled, "The Truth Behind the Lies." Send it, I said, my voice flat. She wanted to be famous, Harrison. Let's make her famous. Harrison pressed the key. Sent. Then he switched tabs to the social media page. He uploaded the video of Courtney throwing herself against the wall and messing up her hair. He added a simple caption. We apologize to our community for the recent disturbance. We believe in transparency. Here is the unedited security footage of the alleged assault referenced by the user TruthSeeker99. We are open for business and our kitchen has just received a perfect score from the health inspector. Harrison hit post. Now we wait, he said. We didn't have to wait long. The internet moves faster than a grease fire. Within 10 minutes, the view count on the video jumped from 50 to 5,000, then 50,000. The comments section, which had been a cesspool of hate, suddenly froze. People were watching. They were seeing the beautiful blonde victim throw herself into a wall like a linebacker. They were seeing her check her makeup in her phone reflection before screaming for help. The tide turned so fast it was dizzying. The comments started pouring in again, but this time they were different. She faked it. Oh my God, look at her face. She is laughing. This woman is a psychopath. Justice for Elijah. I watched the numbers climb. I watched the star rating of my restaurant slowly tick back up as people deleted their bad reviews in shame. But I wasn't watching for the likes. I was waiting for the phone call. It came at 10 o'clock. But it wasn't Courtney calling me. It was a notification from a local news outlet. They had picked up the story. Local marketing executive caught faking assault on elderly father-in-law. I imagined Courtney sitting in her glass-walled office in downtown. She was probably sipping an almond milk latte, feeling smug about destroying my reputation. She probably didn't know that the email had landed in the inbox of her CEO 20 minutes ago. At that very moment across town, Courtney Miller was indeed sitting in her office. She was on a call with a potential investor for a new app she was pitching. She was telling him about her integrity and her vision. Suddenly, the door to her office opened without a knock. It wasn't her assistant. It was the vice president of HR and 2 security guards. Courtney hung up the phone. "Can I help you?" she asked, annoyed. "I am on a call." "You need to hang up, Ms. Miller," the VP said. Her voice was cold. "We have received some disturbing evidence regarding your conduct. It has been brought to our attention that you are currently under investigation for elder abuse and fraud." "That is ridiculous," Courtney laughed, standing up. "Who told you that?" "My crazy father-in-law." "We received the video," Ms. Miller, the VP said, holding up a tablet. "The one where you admit to poisoning him. And the one where you faked a crime. Zenith Marketing has a zero-tolerance policy for criminal behavior and ethical violations. We are terminating your contract effective immediately." Courtney's face went white. "You can't do this. I am a top performer. I bring in millions. You are a liability," the VP said. "Security will escort you out. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal effects. Do not touch your computer." "I wasn't there to see it, but I heard about it later. I heard that she screamed. I heard that she threatened to sue them. I heard that, as she was being walked out of the building, holding a box of her things, people were staring at their phones and then looking at her. They had seen the video. The video was everywhere. It was on Twitter. It was on TikTok. She wasn't just fired. She was a meme. She was the face of entitlement and deceit." Her phone started blowing up, not with support, but with cancellations. The investors she had lined up for her side projects sent brief legal emails pulling their funding. The publisher who was interested in her lifestyle book deal sent a termination notice. The house of cards she had built on lies and other people's money collapsed in the span of a single morning coffee break. She stood on the sidewalk outside her office building. She had no job, she had no home, she had no car, and thanks to the internet, she had no reputation. She dialed Jordan's number, screaming into the phone, but for once, Jordan couldn't help her. Jordan had his own problems. While Courtney was facing the court of public opinion, Jordan was facing a much darker tribunal. He was sitting in a cheap motel room on the outskirts of town. The room smelled of stale smoke and despair. The wallpaper was peeling and the air conditioner rattled like a dying engine. This was where they had ended up after the eviction. It was the only place that took cash and didn't ask for a credit check. Jordan was staring at his laptop, trying to find a way to access his offshore accounts, but they were all frozen. I had frozen them. The trust documents gave me the power to lock down any assets connected to the family business, and since Jordan had used company funds to open them, they were technically mine. There was a heavy knock on the door. Jordan jumped. "Who is it?" he called out, his voice trembling. "Room service," a deep voice answered. Jordan didn't order room service. This motel didn't have room service. He knew who it was. It was the Sharks. The people he had borrowed money from to pay for the wedding and Courtney's wardrobe. The people who didn't care about credit scores or lawsuits. They only cared about cash. Jordan backed away toward the window, but they were on the second floor. The lock on the door clicked. They had a key. 2 men walked in. They were large. They wore leather jackets that squeaked when they moved. One of them looked around the dirty room and sneered. "Nice place, Jordan," the man said. "Is this where the big architect lives now?" I am getting the money," Jordan stammered, holding his hands up. "I just need a few more days. My dad, he is going to sell a property. I will have it next week." The man laughed. "We heard about your dad. We saw the news. He isn't selling anything, is he? He kicked you out. You are broke, Jordan, and we don't like broke." The man stepped forward and grabbed Jordan by the lapels of his wrinkled suit. He slammed him against the wall. A picture frame fell and shattered. "You have 24 hours, the man whispered. 24 hours to come up with 50,000. Or we start breaking things. And we will start with your fingers. You need those to draw, don't you?" They threw him onto the bed and left. The door slammed shut, leaving Jordan alone in the silence. He was shaking so hard his teeth rattled. He reached for his phone. He didn't call Courtney. He knew she was useless now. He dialed the one number he had ignored for years. He dialed home. I was in the kitchen at the restaurant checking the brisket. My phone vibrated on the stainless steel counter. I looked at the screen. Son calling. I let it ring. I watched the name flash on the screen. I imagined him begging. I imagined him crying. I remembered the way he had looked at the floor when Courtney called me a monster. I remembered the way he had handed me the power of attorney form. He wasn't calling because he was sorry. He was calling because he was scared. He was calling because he needed money. I reached out and pressed the red button to decline the call. Then I turned the phone over face down. Ms. Hattie walked in carrying a tray of clean glasses. "Who was that?" she asked. "Nobody." I said, checking the temperature of the meat. "Just a telemarketer trying to sell me something I don't need." I closed the smoker lid. The fire was hot. The smoke was thick. And for the first time in a long time, the air tasted clean. I had cleared the rot out of my life. Now it was time to let them sit in the mess they had made. Jordan had 24 hours. I wondered if he would finally learn how to be a man, or if he would break under the pressure. I suspected he would break, and I knew exactly who he would blame. The air in the motel room was thick with smoke and the smell of cheap takeout that had gone cold hours ago. I wasn't there, but I saw the aftermath in the police report, and Jordan told me the rest later when he could finally speak without crying. Courtney was pacing the small, stained carpet like a caged tiger. Her hair, which was usually perfectly styled, was a tangled mess. Her makeup was smeared, giving her the look of a raccoon that had been digging through trash. She had lost everything. Her job was gone. Her reputation was shredded. Her friends had blocked her number, and now the loan sharks were circling. She stopped pacing and looked at Jordan, who was sitting on the edge of the sagging bed, staring at his hands. "It is his fault," she hissed. Her voice was raspy from hours of screaming. "He did this to us, Jordan. He planned it. He wanted to humiliate me. He wanted to see us crawl." Jordan didn't look up. "We tried to steal from him, Courtney. We got caught." "No," she shrieked, throwing a plastic cup against the wall. "We were taking what was owed to us. He is sitting on millions, Jordan. Millions. And he is letting his own son rot in this rat hole while he plays the hero on the internet. He ruined my life. He took my career. He took my dignity. And now he is going to pay." She walked over to the corner of the room where she had placed a red plastic gas can she had bought at the gas station down the road. The smell of gasoline leaked into the room, sharp and chemical. "What are you doing with that?" Jordan asked, his eyes widening. "We are going to finish what we started," she said, a cold smile spreading across her face. "If I can't have the money, nobody can. If he wants to be the king of barbecue, let's see how he likes it when his kingdom is a pile of ash." "Courtney, you are crazy," Jordan said, standing up. "That is arson. That is a felony. We need the insurance money," she said, her logic twisted by desperation and madness. "If the place burns down, he gets a payout. Maybe then he will feel guilty enough to help us. Or maybe he will just die of a heart attack when he sees it gone. Either way, I win." She kicked the gas can toward him. "You are going to do it?" she commanded. "Me," Jordan stammered. "Yes, you. You know the alarm code. You know the back entrance. You are going to go there tonight. You are going to pour this all over the kitchen. And you are going to light a match. Consider it your contribution to the family. Since you can't pay the sharks, maybe this will make you feel like a man." "I can't do that," Jordan whispered. "That is my dad's life." "Your dad hates you," she spat. "He hung up on you, remember? He doesn't care if you live or die. Now take the can, Jordan, or I will tell the sharks exactly where we are hiding." Jordan looked at his wife. He looked at the madness in her eyes. He realized then that he wasn't married to a person. He was married to a demon. But he was weak. And he was terrified. So he picked up the can. While my son was driving through the dark streets with a gallon of gasoline in the passenger seat, I was sitting in the dark office of Thorne's Legacy. I hadn't gone home. After the threat from the loan sharks, I knew Jordan was desperate. And desperate men do stupid things. I had sent the staff home early. I had locked the doors. But I stayed. I set up a cot in the back office. I had my grandfather's baseball bat leaning against the desk. I wasn't going to let anyone touch my restaurant, not the sharks, not Courtney, not even my son. It was 2 a.m. when I heard the sound. It was the faint click of the back door lock. I had changed the locks on the house, but I hadn't changed the locks on the restaurant yet. I didn't think Jordan would stoop this low. I sat up quietly. I didn't turn on the light. I watched the security monitor. A figure walked into the kitchen. It was Jordan. He was wearing a dark hoodie, but I knew his walk. He was carrying something heavy. I stood up and walked silently into the kitchen. I stood in the shadows by the walk-in cooler. Jordan placed the red can on the prep table. He stood there for a long time looking around. He looked at the smoker, which was cold for the night. He looked at the photos of Althea on the wall. He ran his hand over the stainless steel counter where he used to sit and do his homework while I chopped vegetables. I saw his shoulders shaking. He was crying. He reached for the can. He unscrewed the cap. The smell of gasoline hit the air, cutting through the lingering scent of hickory, but he didn't pour it. He stood there holding the can, his hands trembling so violently that the fuel sloshed inside. "I can't," he whispered to the empty room. "I can't do it." He screwed the cap back on. He slumped against the table, burying his face in his hands. I was about to step out. I was about to go to him and tell him that it was okay, that he had made the right choice, that there was still hope for him. But then the back door opened again. This time there was no hesitation. Courtney walked in. She was wearing black leather gloves and holding a long fireplace lighter. Her eyes were wild, darting around the dark kitchen. She saw Jordan leaning against the table with the closed gas can. "You coward," she hissed, her voice echoing in the silent kitchen. "I knew you couldn't do it. I knew you were too weak." She marched over to him and shoved him aside. She grabbed the gas can. "Courtney, stop," Jordan pleaded, grabbing her arm. "We can't do this. This is insane." "Let go of me," she screamed. She was strong, fueled by adrenaline and hate. She shoved him back against the stove. She unscrewed the cap and began splashing gasoline onto the floor. The liquid splashed over the rubber mats. It splashed onto the legs of the prep tables. It splashed onto Jordan's shoes. "Stop it!" Jordan yelled, lunging at her. That was when I stepped out of the shadows. "That is enough," I said, my voice booming in the small space. Courtney froze. She turned to look at me. She didn't look scared. She looked delighted. "You are here," she laughed. "Even better. You can watch it burn." She raised the lighter. Her thumb hovered over the trigger. "Courtney, don't!" Jordan screamed. He threw himself at her. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He was trying to grab the lighter. They grappled in the middle of the gasoline puddle. Courtney was screaming, scratching at his face like a wild animal. Jordan was trying to pin her arms. "Let go!" she shrieked. She brought her knee up, slamming it into Jordan's stomach. He doubled over, gasping for air. Then, with a strength I didn't know she possessed, she shoved him. It happened in slow motion. Jordan stumbled back. His feet slipped on the gasoline-soaked floor. He fell backward. His head hit the sharp metal corner of the industrial smoker with a sickening crack. "Jordan," I shouted, running forward. My son hit the floor and didn't move. A dark pool of blood began to spread under his head, mixing with the gasoline. Courtney stood there, chest heaving, staring at her husband's motionless body. For a second, the madness cleared from her eyes, replaced by shock. He slipped," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." Then she looked at me. She looked at the lighter in her hand. She looked at the gasoline. "It doesn't matter," she said, her face hardening again. "It is all your fault anyway." She clicked the lighter. A small flame erupted at the tip. "Drop it, Courtney," I warned, stepping between her and my fallen son. "Stay back," she yelled, waving the lighter. "I will do it, Elijah. I swear I will do it." "You have killed your marriage," I said, moving slowly toward her. "You have tried to kill my reputation, and now you have hurt my son. You are done, Courtney. Look out the window." She glanced toward the front window. Blue and red lights were flashing against the glass, silent but blinding. I had triggered the silent alarm the moment I saw Jordan enter. "The police are here," I said. "It is over." Courtney looked at the lights. She looked at the lighter. She looked at the gasoline at her feet. She realized she was standing in a trap of her own making. If she dropped the lighter, she would burn. If she didn't, she would go to prison. She let out a scream of pure frustration, a primal sound of defeat. She threw the lighter, but she didn't throw it at the gas. She threw it at me. It hit my chest and bounced off, landing on the wet floor. The flame was still lit. "No," I shouted. I dove for the lighter. I grabbed it just as the flame licked the edge of the gasoline puddle. I smothered the flame with my bare hand, burning my palm, but extinguishing the threat. The back door burst open. "Police, drop the weapon," a voice shouted. 3 officers stormed in, guns drawn. They saw me on the floor, cradling my burned hand. They saw Courtney standing over Jordan's unconscious body, looking like a specter of death. "It was him," she screamed, pointing at me. "He tried to burn it. He hit his son." The lead officer looked at me. Then he looked at the security camera mounted right above the prep table, blinking with a steady red light. "Cuff her," the officer said, pointing at Courtney. "No," Courtney shrieked as they grabbed her. "You can't touch me. I am the victim. He is the monster." They dragged her out, kicking and screaming. Her heels left scratches on the floor she had tried to destroy. I didn't watch her go. I crawled over to Jordan. I placed my hand on his chest. He was breathing shallow and fast. The blood was still flowing from the wound on his head. "Hold on, son," I whispered, brushing the hair out of his eyes. "Hold on. The ambulance is coming." I looked around my kitchen. It smelled of gas and blood. It was a crime scene. But as I held my son in my arms, I realized it was also a place of salvation. He hadn't lit the match. In the end, when it mattered most, he hadn't lit the match. He had saved the restaurant. Now I had to save him. The fluorescent lights of the police station hummed with a sound that drilled straight into my skull. It was 4 a.m. My right hand was wrapped in thick white gauze, throbbing with a dull, persistent heat where the lighter had burned me. But the pain in my hand was nothing compared to the exhaustion in my soul. I sat on a hard plastic chair watching the chaos of the night shift. Drunks were being booked. Officers were drinking stale coffee. And somewhere in a holding cell down the hall, the woman who had tried to burn my legacy to the ground was sitting on a metal bench. I wasn't alone. Harrison was sitting next to me, his briefcase resting on his knees like a shield. We were waiting for the inevitable arrival of the cavalry. And sure enough, 20 minutes later, the double doors swung open. Robert and Cynthia Miller walked in. They didn't look like parents coming to see a child in trouble. They looked like royalty visiting a leper colony. Robert was wearing a cashmere coat over silk pajamas. Cynthia was wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, clutching a Hermes bag that probably cost more than the annual salary of the desk sergeant. They spotted me immediately. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't ask about Jordan, who was currently lying in a trauma unit across town. They marched straight up to me, their eyes blazing with indignation. "You," Robert Miller spat, his voice echoing in the quiet waiting room. "You have done it now, Elijah. You have pushed her too far." I looked up at him slowly. I didn't stand up. I didn't feel the need to show respect to a man who had raised a monster. I pushed her. I asked, my voice raspy from the smoke. I pushed her to pour gasoline in my kitchen. I pushed her to strike a match. "Don't play innocent with me," Robert growled. He pulled a checkbook out of his coat pocket. "We know what this is. This is a shakedown. You want money. Fine. How much? How much to drop the charges and tell the police it was an accident? 50,000. 100,000. Cynthia chimed in, her lip curling in disgust. "Just take the money, Elijah. We know you need it. And if you don't, we will sue you for everything you have. We will sue you for entrapment. We will sue you for emotional distress. We have lawyers who eat men like you for breakfast. We play golf with the district attorney. Do you really think a jury is going to believe you over a terrified young woman?" I looked at the checkbook. I looked at their arrogant faces. They honestly believed that their money was a magic wand. They believed that the law didn't apply to people who summered in the Hamptons. I stood up then. I towered over Robert Miller. I held up my bandaged hand. "Your daughter threw a lit lighter at me," I said. "She knocked my son unconscious. She tried to burn down a building with people inside. That is not a misunderstanding, Robert. That is attempted murder. And arson, and assault with a deadly weapon. You can't write a check for that." Harrison stood up beside me. He smoothed his tie and stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I am Harrison Banks representing Mr. Thorne. I strongly suggest you put that checkbook away before I add attempted bribery of a witness to the list of charges your family is facing today." Robert laughed. It was a nervous laugh. "Who is this clown, Elijah, your public defender? I am the man who is going to make sure your daughter spends the next 15 years in a state penitentiary," Harrison said calmly. "And if you think your golf buddies can help you, I suggest you look at the evidence we just handed to the detective." Harrison opened his briefcase. He didn't pull out papers. He pulled out a tablet. "We have video," Harrison said. "High-definition video with audio. Would you like to see your daughter pouring gasoline on her husband? Would you like to hear her screaming that she wants to watch the building burn?" Cynthia gasped, clutching her pearls. That is fake. You doctored it." Harrison tapped the screen. "We also have the forensic accounting records," he continued relentlessly. "We know about the credit cards she opened in Jordan's name. We know about the loans she applied for using Elijah's forged signature. We have the notary who is ready to testify that she tried to coerce an elderly man into signing away his estate. This isn't a," she said, "case, Mrs. Miller. This is a mountain of evidence. And the district attorney you play golf with, I just got off the phone with him. He is very interested in the elder abuse angle. It plays very well in an election year." Robert's face went from red to a sickly shade of gray. He looked at Harrison, then he looked at me. The arrogance was cracking. He realized that this wasn't a problem he could make disappear. This was a scandal, a massive public humiliating scandal. "Where is she?" Cynthia whispered, taking off her sunglasses. "I want to see my daughter," the desk sergeant called out. "Miller, you can go back now, counsel only." Their lawyer, a slick man in a cheap suit who had trailed in behind them, hurried forward. Robert and Cynthia followed him into the back. I sat back down. I closed my eyes. I didn't feel triumph. I felt sad. I felt sad that it had come to this. 10 minutes later, the doors opened again. The lawyer came out first, looking grim. Robert and Cynthia followed. They looked shell-shocked. Harrison stood up. "Well," the lawyer shook his head. "No bail. The judge was woken up for an emergency arraignment because of the severity of the charges. Given the flight risk and the violent nature of the crime, she is being remanded to custody until the hearing next week." Robert Miller walked over to a trash can and spat into it. He wiped his mouth with a silk handkerchief. "She is crazy," he muttered. "What did you say?" I asked. "She is crazy," Robert said louder, turning to look at me with hate-filled eyes. "But not for me, for her. She admitted it, Elijah. She started screaming in there. She said she did it because we put too much pressure on her. Can you believe that? After everything we gave her, the cars, the vacations, the private schools, she blames us." He buttoned his coat. His hands were shaking. "We are done," he said. "What do you mean you are done?" Harrison asked. "I mean, we are washing our hands of this," Robert said. "We have a reputation in this town. I sit on the board of the hospital. Cynthia is the chair of the Arts Foundation. We cannot be associated with an arsonist. We cannot have our names dragged through the mud because our daughter decided to become a criminal." Cynthia was crying, but they were tears of self-pity. "The gala is next week," she sobbed. "How can I show my face? Everyone will be talking." "You are leaving her?" I asked incredulously. "You are leaving your child in a cell alone?" "She made her bed," Robert said coldly. "We offered to pay for the best defense if she kept her mouth shut and pleaded insanity, but she started cursing at us. She is toxic, Elijah. You know that better than anyone. We are cutting her off. No lawyer, no money. She is on her own." They walked toward the exit. They walked away from their daughter as easily as they would walk away from a bad investment. I watched them go. I realized then where Courtney had learned her cruelty. She hadn't been born a monster. She had been made one by people who valued image over love. "Let's go, Harrison," I said, standing up. "I have one more stop to make." We drove to the hospital in silence. The sun was just starting to come up, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. It was a beautiful morning for such an ugly night. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. I walked down the quiet hallway to room 304. I pushed the door open gently. Jordan was lying in the bed. His head was wrapped in heavy bandages. His face was bruised and swollen. He looked small. He looked like the little boy who used to scrape his knees playing in the parking lot of the restaurant. He was awake. He was staring at the ceiling, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes running into his ears. He turned his head when I walked in. He saw my bandaged hand. "Dad," he croaked. His voice was weak. I walked over and pulled a chair up to the bedside. I sat down. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just looked at him. "I am sorry," Jordan whispered. "I am so sorry, Dad. I almost did it." "But you didn't," I said softly. "I picked up the can," he said. "I smelled the gas. I was so scared, Dad. The sharks, they said they would kill me." "We will deal with the sharks," I said. "The police know about them now. They are part of the investigation. You are safe from them, Jordan." Jordan closed his eyes. "She is gone, isn't she?" "She is in jail," I said. "Her parents abandoned her. She has nobody left." Jordan let out a sob that shook his whole body. "I loved her, Dad. I really loved her. I wanted to give her everything. I wanted to be the man she wanted." "You can't build a house on quicksand, son," I said, reaching out to pat his leg. "And you can't build a life on lies. She didn't love you, Jordan. She loved what she thought you could give her, and when you couldn't give it, she tried to burn you down." Jordan opened his eyes. He looked at me with such profound shame that it broke my heart. "Can you ever forgive me?" he asked. I looked at my burned hand. I looked at the son who had almost destroyed my life's work. "Forgiveness is a process, Jordan," I said. "It is like smoking meat. You can't rush it. It takes time, it takes heat. But I am here. I am sitting in this chair. That has to count for something. He nodded slowly. What happens now, he asked. Now you heal, I said. And when you get out of this bed, you have a choice. You can go back to trying to be a big-shot architect with no money and a criminal record. Or you can come home. Not to the big house. I am renting that out. But you can come to the restaurant. You want me at the restaurant? Jordan asked, surprised. I need a dishwasher, I said. My best dishwasher just got promoted to prep cook. The pay is minimum wage, the hours are long, and the boss is a hard man to please. But the food is free, and nobody there will judge you for your past only for how clean you get the plates. Jordan looked at me. A faint smile touched his bruised lips. I am pretty good at scrubbing, he said. We will see, I said, standing up. Get some sleep, son. I have to go open the store. The customers will be wondering why the kitchen smells like gasoline. I walked out of the hospital room. I walked out into the morning sun. I took a deep breath of fresh air. My hand hurt. My heart hurt. But I was still standing. My legacy was still standing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the future was something I could handle. 6 months is a long time in the restaurant business. In 6 months, you can smoke 2,000 briskets. You can serve 50,000 customers. And you can watch a scandal fade from a raging fire to a pile of cold ash. Thorne's legacy had recovered. In fact, we were doing better than ever. The community had rallied around us after the truth came out. People came for the ribs, but they stayed for the integrity. The reviews were back to 5 stars. The health score was a perfect A. The only thing missing was the noise. My house was quiet. My life was peaceful. But sometimes peace feels a lot like loneliness. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the bell above the front door chimed. It wasn't the lunch rush, and it was too early for dinner. I was behind the counter wiping down the register. I looked up expecting a delivery driver. It was Jordan. He didn't look like the man who had stood in this room 6 months ago demanding I sell the building. He didn't look like the hotshot architect in the $3,000 suit. He was wearing a pair of faded jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. He had lost weight. His face was gaunt, and he had a shadow of a beard that spoke of neglect rather than style. He looked like a ghost. He stood by the door, hesitating. He looked at the floor, then he looked at me. "Hey, Dad," he said. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in days. I put down the rag. I didn't smile. I didn't rush to hug him. I just watched him. "Hello, Jordan," I said. "You are out." "Probation," he said, stepping further into the room. 3 years, community service, and restitution. I have to pay back the money I took from the firm. "And Courtney?" I asked. Jordan flinched at the name. 5 years, he said. "She took a plea deal. She tried to pin it all on me, but the video was too strong. She is in a minimum security facility upstate. I filed the divorce papers last week. It is over, Dad. All of it." He walked up to the counter. He placed his hands on the wood. I noticed his fingernails were clean but bitten down to the quick. "I have nowhere to go," he whispered. "The apartment is gone. The car is gone. My license to practice architecture is suspended pending a review. Nobody will hire me. I am living in a shelter downtown, but you can only stay there for 2 weeks. I looked at my son. I saw the ruin of a man who had flown too close to the sun on wings made of wax. I saw the humiliation. But for the first time in his life, I didn't see entitlement. I didn't see the expectation that I would fix it. I just saw a man stating a fact. "What do you want, Jordan?" I asked. "I want a chance," he said. "Not money. I don't want a penny. I just want to work. I want to earn my way back. I will do anything. I will paint the walls. I will sweep the parking lot. I just need a place to be. I need to know that I am not completely worthless." I looked at him for a long silence. I could have written him a check. I could have set him up in an apartment. I had the money. But that would have been the worst thing I could do. That would be feeding the sickness that had almost killed him. He didn't need a savior. He needed a shovel. I walked out from behind the counter. I signaled to Ms. Hattie, who was watching from the kitchen door with tears in her eyes. "Bring me the apron, Hattie," I said. She disappeared and came back a moment later holding a heavy industrial rubber apron and a pair of thick black gloves. I tossed them onto the counter in front of Jordan. They landed with a heavy slap. "We have an opening," I said, "but it isn't for a manager, and it isn't for a host." Jordan looked at the apron. He knew what it meant. It meant the dish pit. The hottest, wettest, hardest job in the entire restaurant. It was the job where the grease collected. It was the job where you went home smelling like garbage and bleach. The pay is minimum wage, I said. No tips. You start at 10 in the morning and you leave when the last pan is clean. You get one meal a day. You don't get a parking spot because you don't have a car. And Jordan, this is the most important part. I leaned in close so he could see the seriousness in my eyes. In this building, I am not your father, I am the owner, and you are the dishwasher. If you are late, once you are fired. If you complain, once you are fired. If you treat any member of my staff with anything less than total respect, you are fired. Do you understand? Jordan ran his hand over the rubber apron. He looked at the kitchen where the steam was rising and the noise of the lunch prep was beginning. It was a long way down from the executive suite. It was a long way down from the country club. I understand, he said. He picked up the apron. He put it over his head. He tied the strings behind his back. When do I start? He asked. There is a stack of pots in the back from the morning prep, I said, pointing to the kitchen. They have been soaking for an hour. Get to it. Jordan nodded. He walked past me. He walked past Ms. Hattie. He walked into the kitchen and disappeared into the steam. I went back to the register. My heart was beating fast. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. To see my son, the boy I had dreamed would be a king, scrubbing pots like a servant. But I knew it was the only way. You can't polish a diamond without friction. And Jordan had a lot of rough edges left to grind down. For the next 4 hours, I listened to the sound of the sprayer in the back. I heard the clanging of metal on metal. I didn't check on him. Around 6 o'clock, the dinner rush started. The restaurant filled up. Among the customers were people who knew Jordan, people he had gone to high school with, people who had been guests at his fancy wedding. A group of 3 young men walked in. They were laughing, wearing expensive suits. They sat at a booth near the kitchen door. I saw Jordan come out to bus a table. He was soaked in sweat. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He was carrying a tub of dirty dishes. One of the men in the booth spotted him. He stopped laughing. He nudged his friend. "Hey, isn't that Jordan Thorne?" he said loud enough for half the room to hear. The friend turned around. No way. The architect. The guy who tried to scam his dad. "It is him," the first guy laughed. "Look at him. He is a busboy." "Hey, Jordan." Jordan froze. He was holding the heavy tub. He looked at the table. He saw the faces of men he used to buy drinks for, men he used to try to impress. I saw his grip tighten on the tub. I saw his jaw clench. This was the moment. This was the test. Would he snap? Would he run? Would he throw the tub and scream that he was better than this? Jordan took a deep breath. He looked the man in the eye. "Hello, Mike," he said, his voice steady. "Enjoy the ribs. They are good tonight." He turned and walked back into the kitchen. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He walked with the dignity of a man doing a job. The men at the table fell silent. They looked uncomfortable. They realized that their mockery hadn't landed. They realized that the man carrying the dirty dishes had something they didn't. He had humility. I stood at the pass, observing everything. I felt a lump form in my throat. I cleared it away quickly. I couldn't let anyone see me getting soft. Ms. Hattie walked up to me. She wiped her hands on her apron. "He is working hard, Elijah," she whispered. "He hasn't taken a break." He scrubbed the grease trap. Nobody ever scrubs the grease trap on their first day. I nodded, keeping my face impassive. "He is doing his job, Hattie," I said. "That is what he is paid for." But inside I felt a warmth spreading through my chest. It wasn't the heat of the kitchen. It was the heat of pride. Not the pride of having a successful son, but the pride of having a son who was finally becoming a man. I watched him through the window of the swinging door. He was deep in the suds scrubbing a burnt pan. He looked tired. He looked miserable. But he was there. He hadn't quit. "Keep scrubbing, son," I thought to myself. "Keep scrubbing. You are not just cleaning pots. You are cleaning your soul. And one day, if you keep this up, that apron won't be a mark of shame. It will be a badge of honor." I turned back to the cutting board. I had brisket to slice. The restaurant was full. The register was ringing. And for the first time in a long time, the family business actually felt like a family again. The winter thawed into spring, and spring warmed into a summer that felt different than any other. The air in the neighborhood was changing. You could feel it in the way people walked down the street. The heavy cloud of gentrification that had threatened to suffocate us had lifted. replaced by a renewed sense of community pride. Thorne's legacy wasn't just a restaurant anymore, it was a fortress. It was proof that you couldn't buy what wasn't for sale. But the sharks hadn't disappeared completely, they just changed their suits. It was a Monday morning when the black limousine pulled up to the curb. It took up 3 parking spaces. A man stepped out. He didn't look like the health inspector or the loan sharks. He looked like money. Old money. He walked into the restaurant with the confidence of a man who owned the pavement he stepped on. I was at the counter going over the weekly inventory. Jordan was in the back, prepping vegetables. He had been working the dish pit and prep station for 8 months now. He had lost the soft look of the corporate world. His hands were rough. His back was strong. He didn't complain. He just worked. The man approached the counter. He placed a gold-embossed business card on the wood. "Mr. Thorne," he said, "my name is Sterling. I represent the Omnicorp Development Group." I didn't pick up the card. "I know who you are, Mr. Sterling," I said. "You are the people buying up the South Side. You are the reason the bakery on 5th Street is now a parking lot." Mr. Sterling smiled a polite shark-like smile. "We prefer to call it urban revitalization, and that is why I am here. We have been watching your property, Mr. Thorne, not just the restaurant but the entire strip. It is a remarkable portfolio, a singular contiguous block in a prime location." He opened his briefcase. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the counter. "We are prepared to make you an offer that considers the emotional value of your business," he said. I looked at the number. It was a 5, followed by 7 zeros. $50 million. The number was so large it didn't look real. It looked like a phone number. $50 million. It was enough to buy a private island. It was enough to buy a fleet of cars. It was enough to ensure that no Thorne would ever have to work a day in their life for the next 10 generations. I looked at Mr. Sterling. Then I looked at the kitchen door where Jordan was chopping onions. "That is a lot of money," I said. "It is a fair market value," Mr. Sterling said, "plus a premium for a quick close. We want to break ground by the fall. We plan to build a mixed-use high-rise, luxury retail on the bottom, penthouses on the top. It will be the jewel of the district, and the restaurant," I asked. Mr. Sterling sighed. "Unfortunately, the structure would have to be demolished. But with $50 million, Mr. Thorne, you could build a new restaurant anywhere you want. You could build 10 of them, or you could simply retire and never smell smoke again." I picked up the paper. I felt the weight of it. "Give me 24 hours, I said. Mr. Sterling nodded. "I will call you tomorrow at noon." He left, leaving the scent of expensive cologne hanging in the air. I walked into the kitchen. Jordan looked up. He saw the paper in my hand. He saw the look on my face. "What was that, Dad?" he asked, wiping his hands on his apron. I handed him the paper. Jordan looked at it. His eyes went wide. He gasped. $50 million, he whispered. He looked at me. He looked around the kitchen at the old stoves and the chipped tiles. "Dad," he said, "you have to take this." I looked at him closely. "Why, Jordan?" "Because you earned it," he said. His voice was earnest. "You worked for 40 years. You fought everyone. You won. This is the prize, Dad. You can finally rest. You can go fishing. You can travel. You deserve this." "And what about you?" I asked. "What about the inheritance?" Jordan shook his head. He smiled a sad, genuine smile. "I don't want it. I mean, it would be nice, but I don't deserve it. I tried to steal a fraction of this from you. I am happy washing dishes, Dad. I am happy just being here. Take the money for yourself." I took the paper back from him. "Clean up," I said. "Close the restaurant early. Call the staff. Tell everyone to be in the dining room at 6 o'clock. Call Harrison, too." At 6 o'clock, the dining room was full. Ms. Hattie was there, sitting in the front row in her Sunday hat. The cooks were there, still in their whites. The tenants from the strip were there, the owner of the yoga studio, the coffee shop manager, the dry cleaner. And Jordan was there, sitting in the back, wearing his work clothes. Harrison sat next to me at the head table. He had a stack of documents in front of him. I looked out at the faces of the people who made my life possible. "Today, I was offered $50 million for this block," I said. A gasp went through the room. Miss Hattie put her hand over her mouth. The coffee shop manager looked terrified. They knew what that meant. It meant they were out on the street. It meant the end of their livelihoods. $50 million is a lot of money, I continued. It is enough to buy freedom. It is enough to buy silence. But I asked the man what he would build here. He said luxury condos. He said a high-rise. I looked at the photos on the wall, photos of birthday parties, photos of graduations. He didn't say anything about community, I said. He didn't say anything about where Ms. Hattie would go. He didn't say where the people of this neighborhood would eat. He talked about square footage. He didn't talk about soul. I picked up the offer letter. I held it up so everyone could see the number. My son told me I should take this, I said, looking at Jordan. He told me I deserve to rest. And he is right. I am tired. My hands hurt. My back hurts. It is time for Elijah Thorne to step away from the smoker. The room went deadly silent. Ms. Hattie started to cry softly. Jordan looked down at his feet, but I continued, my voice rising. I realized something today. A legacy isn't what you leave in a bank account. A legacy is what you leave in people. If I sell this place for $50 million, I am not a success. I am just another man who sold out his people for a check. I ripped the paper in half. Then I ripped it again. I am not selling, I said. A cheer started to rise, but I held up my hand. I am not selling, I repeated. But I am also not staying. I nodded to Harrison. He stood up and opened the legal folder. Effective immediately, Harrison announced, his voice clear and professional. Mr. Thorne has transferred the ownership of all land and businesses within the Thorne block into an irrevocable trust known as the Althea Thorne Perpetual Trust. What does that mean? Ms. Hattie asked. It means Harrison said that the land can never be sold. It can never be developed into condos. It belongs to the trust, and the beneficiaries of the trust are you. Harrison picked up a stack of envelopes. Every employee who has been with Thorne's legacy for more than 5 years is now a vested partner, he said. Ms. Hattie, you own 5% of the restaurant's profits. The head cook owns 3%. The tenants of the strip, you are now on 99-year leases with rent control locked at the current rate. You are safe. Nobody can move you. The room erupted. Ms. Hattie was sobbing openly now. The tenants were hugging each other. It was the sound of relief. It was the sound of security. I waited for the noise to die down. Then I looked at the back of the room. Jordan, come here, I said. Jordan walked slowly to the front. He looked stunned. He looked scared. You told me to take the money, I said. You didn't ask for a dime. That tells me you are finally ready. Ready for what, Dad? He whispered. Harrison handed me a thick document. This is the management contract for the trust, I said. The trust needs a trustee. It needs someone to manage the leases, to handle the maintenance, to ensure the standards are kept high. It needs someone who knows the value of hard work, but who also understands the numbers. I handed the document to Jordan. I am appointing you as the executive trustee of the Althea Thorne Trust, I said. Jordan took the document. His hands were shaking. Me, but Dad, I am a dishwasher. You were a dishwasher, I corrected him. Now you are the manager. But there is a catch. I pointed to the fine print. You draw a salary, I said. A good salary. Enough to have a house. Enough to have a life. But you do not own the land. You can never sell it. If you try to sell it, the trust dissolves and everything goes to charity. And here is the other thing. Your salary is performance-based. If the restaurant rating drops below 4 stars, your salary drops. If the tenants aren't happy, your salary drops. You serve them, Jordan. They don't serve you. Jordan looked at the document. He looked at Ms. Hattie. He looked at the staff. He realized what I was giving him. I wasn't giving him a winning lottery ticket. I was giving him a responsibility. I was giving him a purpose. I will do it, he said. His voice was strong. I won't let you down, Dad. I swear. I know you won't, I said. Because if you do, Ms. Hattie has full authority to fire you. Ms. Hattie laughed through her tears. You best believe I will, she said. I took off my apron, the heavy rubber apron I had worn for 40 years. I folded it carefully on the table. It is your kitchen now, son, I said. Keep it clean. I walked out of the restaurant. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The air was warm. I walked to the curb where a vehicle was parked. It wasn't the company van. It wasn't a luxury sedan. It was a 1978 Chevy Silverado, red and white with a few dents in the bumper. I had tracked down the collector I sold it to. I had bought it back with the profits from the last quarter. I ran my hand over the hood. It felt warm. It felt right. Jordan came out of the restaurant. He stood on the sidewalk watching me. Where are you going, Dad? He asked. I opened the driver's side door. The seat creaked as I sat down. It was a familiar sound, a welcoming sound. I am going fishing, I said. There is a lake up north that I haven't seen in 20 years. After that, who knows? I might drive across the country. I hear the barbecue in Texas is almost as good as mine. I need to go verify that. Jordan smiled. He leaned into the window. "Thank you, Dad," he said, "for everything." I looked at him. I saw the man he had become. The entitlement was gone, burnt away by the fire of consequence. In its place was gratitude. "Don't thank me," I said, starting the engine. The old truck roared to life, spitting a little smoke but settling into a steady rhythm. "Just make sure the brisket is tender." And Jordan, "Yeah, Dad. Change the oil in the fryer every 3 days. Don't cut corners." "I won't." I put the truck in gear. I pulled away from the curb. I watched in the rearview mirror as my son stood in front of the empire I had built. He looked small against the brick building, but he stood tall. He waved. I tapped the horn once. I drove down the street past the yoga studio, past the coffee shop, past the dry cleaners. I saw the lights coming on in the windows. I saw people living their lives supported by the foundation I had laid. I didn't take the 50 million. Some people would call me crazy. Courtney would certainly call me crazy. But as I merged onto the highway leaving the city behind, I felt richer than any man on earth. Money is just paper. It can burn. It can be stolen. It can be lost in a market crash. But respect. Respect is the concrete that holds the world together. I turned on the radio. An old blues song filled the cab. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel. The road ahead was long and open. I had stayed quiet when my son got married. I had stayed quiet when they tried to steal my life. But my silence hadn't been weakness. It had been the deep breath before the song. And now, as I drove into the sunset, I was finally singing my own tune. My name is Elijah Thorne, and this is my legacy. I learned that true love sometimes looks like a closed door. I learned that you cannot buy respect, and you certainly cannot inherit character. It has to be forged in the fire of hard work. My silence was never about submission. It was about gathering the strength to do what was right instead of what was easy. The greatest inheritance I can leave my son isn't a check for $50 million. It is the opportunity to earn his own self-worth one dirty plate at a time. A legacy built on shortcuts will always collapse, but a legacy built on sweat will last forever. If you believe that integrity is worth more than gold, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Did I do the right thing by making my son start from the bottom, or was I too hard on him? Let me know what you think. See you in the next story.